So I had a topic in mind. We can talk about some other things as well, but the main topic, I'm thinking about this a lot. I don't know why. I just was like on my mind. I was even going to make I think I said mentioned this in the chat. I was going to make a separate video about it, but I thought it'd be better as a discussion, not just to get my opinions, but to kind of hear from others as well. What are the thoughts? So the topic that I had in mind for today was specifically with the DLC. We now have a whole bunch of new additions, and with those new additions come a lot of power creep on basically all sides, right? We have power creep on the player side. You have a lot of new units. You have an entire new clan. And more importantly, you have new modifiers, new ways to improve your deck. And then, of course, you have it on enemy side. A lot of new things with shards. You have the Last Divinity himself. And my question is kind of what do you guys think about power creep one as a general concept in a game? Like, how do you feel when a game adds a whole bunch of new layers like this? What do you think are examples of, good power creep, bad power creep? How do we think it's working in Monster Train? Did they do it in a way that's effective? Or do we feel like they did it in any ways that are maybe not so good for the player? This is kind of what I think about, because I like the idea. I think it's something that people complain a lot about in games, and I'm just curious what you guys think, and also express what I think about how that's going in Monster Train right now. So I don't know how we want to start. Maybe Gabriot, you sound like you had something already.
Yeah, I guess my initial, in a general sense, I don't mind it as much in these single player type games. It made me really angry in games like Hearthstone, where it's like you basically have to buy a new pack to be competitive. That being said, I'll always have some qualms about a lot of the changes, like just because I'm always salty and opinionated. Like right now, it seems like some of the old cards are definitely like invalidated in the DLC. Like they just can't really keep up with the scaling that Shards provides. But it's pretty early too. I might just be bad with figuring out how to make them work in the new world right now. So I think generally I'm not super. Generally, I'm kind of for a lot of the changes. I think I'm not like too against the new world, so to speak. I think it's kind of freshened things up. A lot of old cards that sucked, I find myself using a lot now too.
Like in artifacts too that felt really mediocre. Like cleansing water, for example, is one.
Yeah. Jack strips as well.
But of course, some things suffer. Like anything with just flat damage is just not good anymore. Like the champions that just have big stat sticks are okay, but they don't without built-in scaling. They don't hold up to Last Divinity, but you don't always have to go for Last Divinity. So, I mean, there's still place for them in the game, and so I kind of I like the changes for the most part. I haven't fully explored, and I do feel like there are some cards that are made very situational now, but balanced by other things that are way less situational.
I think maybe let's talk a little bit about some of the examples we see from other games, because I think it's a good way to kind of give a baseline of what would be examples of bad versus good power creep. I think the ultimate gold standard in crappy power creep is MMOs. Like they are basically like you release a DLC, all equipment becomes nullified, all that work you put in to get them becomes nullified because now you immediately get to new stuff. And that for me is like one of those absolute worst things. You don't want something that's going to invalidate work that you put into the game, in my opinion. I don't know if either of you had a lot of time in MMOs like World of Warcraft or any of those.
I put it in a ton of times in MMOs, and it's I mean, I can see that being a negative for a lot of players. I feel like playing in an MMO that has a regular release cycle like World of Warcraft is a very different experience. And if in a single player game, I'm not sure it has the same kind of place for it. I guess you could liken that to something like a single player role playing game like Dragon Age or something. Like, let's say there's an expansion for it and you go to level 30. Yes, it's going to do the same thing where it invalidates some of the stuff you've earned, but that stuff you've earned can help you get that. But with an MMO, you don't need that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like all the things you've earned are completely useless because a brand new character could do the same thing.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there are a lot of good examples of expansions that fundamentally change the core experience. Like, take, for example, like Slay the Spire, when they came up with the update to increase Ascension level to 20, and they added the heart. Didn't change any of the core experience. Like, the core experience is basically untouched. You can play through the heart without any... I mean, what was changed is that sometimes you get
harder, yeah.
You can do some elite fights that are a little bit more difficult, but outside of that, really, none of the cards changed. There was not really any power creep. It was just, okay, for decks that could already do really good against the final bosses, now you can pit them against the heart, and you get one more shot. Maybe that one more shot makes the difference, but basically that's it, right? Other expansions of games... trying to think of some others.
Yeah, I mean, you basically can go vertical or you can go horizontal, right? So, like, adding a new clan obviously doesn't invalidate the other clans unless you're a really bad designer. But we essentially added difficulty, but in a way that made it so other difficulties are potentially easier.
And I would say to a large degree there was a huge risk, especially with the shard mechanic, that it would frustrate players. I think the easier way would be just to add another boss. To say, like, you could just add another, or even like you can take shards and there's no trade-off. It's just now you sometimes get shards, and if you get enough shards, you can face less divinity, and that could have been it. I mean, that's more or less how it works in Slay the Spire. There's no, apart from you, what do you get? If you do Slay the Spire, if you have to get the 3 keys, you have to fight a little bit harder elite fight. You have to skip a rest, basically. And then...
So, yeah, it'd be kind of like the Mutator, right? That gives you shards automatically with no reward.
Yeah.
So... But instead of that, you get to choose when you take the shards, right? So do you feel like your deck is strong now, or do you need to take more later, right? That would be the equivalent to Slay the Spire, where you have specific types of ways to get the heart, right? And I see most people take those difficulty increases later in the runs, and from my experience. But,
yeah, and I think as well this... And I'm trying to think of, to be honest, there's not really a lot of examples of this that I can think of where, like, an expansion DLC came out and fundamentally changed it. That's not multiplayer. Like, you see it all the time in multiplayer games. Expansions, you have Civilization, you add new content, it affects everybody. It's a single player game, but it's a multiplayer game, even if you're a multiplayer against the computer. Similar with Hearthstone. And I think, again, Hearthstone is an example, right? You had always this, like, gold standard of Yeti being a 4/5 for 4. And then now you have, 5 6s for 4. You have 7 7s for 4. You have 4 5s with positive. They're just objectively better power creep. And I kind of like this idea that, at least my experience so far with the DLC is... the type of power creep you have directly affects... Let me say this. It's always a trade-off. Like, there's always a risk. And I like this idea that, like, if you want to play vanilla, you can. Like, as you said, right? You don't ever have to do the shards. You never have to do the last divinity. You could just play vanilla. And if you're going to try to get the biggest, sickest decks, you're going to do it at the cost of potentially crippling your run because of shards. And I think it's a very different style of power creep than I've seen in other games, where oftentimes it's just like either nerfing or buffing, but not this like risk approach, which I think is quite unique. At least I haven't been able to think of a similar setup.
Yeah, for the most part, taking a moderate amount of shards, but not too many, is going to be more powerful. But you get the risk, like maybe a random enemy has spikes, and you just don't have a way to have your backline survive that, you know. So it's a risk reward. I like this. I agree. I like this power creep where it's not invalidating. I can't think of any cards that are just straight up invalidated, especially with unit infusions in play. There are certainly cards that are useful less often, but I don't think there's just the ones that are made redundant entirely.
I do think, and to the point, there are some things, and this is what's hard about it, is because you say there's cards that are invalidated, but they're only invalidated in context of the Last Divinity, that battle.
Right.
Like, they're not invalidated in terms of the rest of the run. They're still gonna you're still gonna manhandle Seraph with a Shadow Siege. You're still gonna manhandle Seraph with a Shadow Siege, even if Shadow Siege is not necessarily the best unit for the Last Divinity. And I think there again, it's and I don't know what is the proper way to contextualize the game at this point. I think for those of us that have played for a long time, the new standard is you've played The Last Divinity. I've done, in all of my runs, I have done one run that didn't have enough shards, and it was because I forgot to go the dupe and I had to remove, and I didn't dupe my last one to get my last 10.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the only reason I've missed The Last Divinity as well. Is a mistake.
My saddest one, I think, was like I didn't have any damage cards, and it only offered me damage in the final temple, and I was 5 short.
Oh no, yeah. I got to a point on ring 6 where I couldn't get it anymore. I was, what?
So
because I could.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm done.
Oh, you're done.
There was just like no temples right at the last one.
Well, it's just the math didn't work out because I didn't have any more dupes, and there was only 20 offered because there were 10 shard temples.
The experience that I don't have a good grasp of, and this is something I think would be good to hear from the broader community, is how have shards affected non-divinity runs? So where you're going to have a Seraph that's at 20 or 40, is that now just a cakewalk because it's easy to get 20, 40 shards or 25 shards? You fuse one unit. Does that just make vanilla Seraph or low Seraph completely invalidated, so that the old Covenant 25 style is no longer nearly as competitive? This is what I don't know, because again, I don't have a lot of experience. I had one run, and it was by accident, and I'd be curious to see at that level if we start to see some of like the negative sides of the power creep, which is people that don't go for Last Divinity, the game's now too easy because of all of the power potential you get, even if you don't go to the full 100 shards.
Yeah, it's tough to say because, unless, if you get 20 shards, I don't think that's a big difference in your ability to beat Seraph. Now, it might help on some earlier fights, but 20 shards in earlier fights means you're fighting tougher enemies. So I don't know that it's just going to make it strictly easier. Of course, if you get the right ones, it's going to make it easier, but I don't think just always it's going to be an easier run. But that's hard to say.
What do you guys think about offense versus defense now? I have a friend of mine's chatting me kind of, I think I might agree with him too. He's kind of saying how it seems like a good offense is now usually better than defense.
Oh yeah, I feel like offense is way more important.
Yeah.
You need to do way more damage, and you have the shards are often where I get my defense passively or whatever, and then I have to focus all of my decisions on getting more offense.
Right.
Yeah,
quick has become nice now too.
Yeah, it's been interesting because sweep is now priority, quick is now priority, and then just raw damage is much more valuable. Spell damage, honestly,
and obviously,
interesting spell damage.
It's kind of like fighting the patient. You need just shutdown for the boss, and then you don't have to worry about defense because there's just so much stuff going on. You don't want to have to worry about also dealing with the boss. But every fight I try to find my way to survive on the top floor in Last Divinity, so that I can forget about it and focus everything else on offense.
So some things that I find in terms of like if you compare again comparing pre and post. So if you look at the top end runs, I think infinites are basically unaffected. Infinites that could one turn Seraph are going to one turn Divinity. And probably even easier because you never have the risk that there's anything blocking Divinity. You will always have, if you want it, you will always have free direct damage to Divinity on a floor, 2 floors, in fact. To a large degree, infinites have become easier, kind of.
Probably. I've never done it. But...
There's a few infinites that used to be a little bit more challenging. In particular, the Cycle of Life Monument, Offering Monument combo is now much easier because you can -2 Cycle of Life, which you couldn't do before. The infinites with Rail Spikes became much easier because you can get, what's it called? Well, it's the when you play a card, you get a second copy.
Oh, right. Spell chain.
Yeah, you can spell chain it, so you can spell chain one into the other, into the other, into the other, into the other, infinitely. So there's some infinites that became a lot easier. That part, I still haven't decided how I feel about it. I haven't been posting any of those runs because I don't find them as interesting, to be honest. Certainly, they're not the nail biters. They're just basically you have one. There's one I posted. I did post one Rail Spikes run because it was the first time I'd done it and it was pretty hilarious. But I've had a few off stream that just they just roll over Last Divinity, and it's a little bit. That part of it I think is I'm still not 100% certain how to deal with that. These infinites, they're rare. You require like at least 2 or 3 specific drafts, but the fact that they're easier to pull off. This is the one area so far that I don't love. I mean, looking at maybe let's talk about power in the new clan.
Actually,
go ahead.
I think that Slay the Spire's Heart had a pretty good answer to some of those infinites that I wouldn't mind them adding to the Divinity fight, which was basically you get punished per card played past a certain point. Well, not even past a certain point. I think in Monster Train, I'd be more down in Monster Train if it's maybe past a certain point. I wouldn't like just playing a card to be punished, but maybe if you've played like 10 in a turn, maybe they start actually...
Or like maybe a boss that made it so every time you played a card, it got stronger or something crazy like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm surprised that something like that doesn't exist.
And this is actually one. I mean, I had the same criticism when the DLC was on public beta. I feel like the Divinity himself is not what's hard about the Divinity. It is exclusively the units that are spawned.
Yeah, and like not even the bosses. Sometimes it's like the ones that randomly have spikes are the ones that throw me off because I don't have the math to prepare for that always.
Channeler floors are brutal. Any type of channeler floor, or especially the ones now that channel or that have incants and stuff like that are pretty brutal.
How about the Wide Harvest?
Yes.
That one.
Yeah. Oh, that one's brutal too. Yeah.
Hallowed Hall's Rip.
Yeah. This is why, that's why I say, like, I think, like, I wouldn't mind if some of the power got shifted into Divinity in the way that you kind of described, Gabriot, that there's some type of effect to negate the power of infinites, because I think those ones are too reliable. And I think it's fine if you can build them easier if there is a counter to it. And currently there's not. Right. You can just first turn. Right. Looking at like other epically strong stuff, I feel like to build some of the more epically strong builds requires such a high amount of luck that I think it's completely reasonable. You can get some decks obviously that are just gonna own Seraph and Last Divinity, but they're decks that you get 1 out of 100 builds, which I think is not really, for me, I don't think that's problematic.
Right. Yeah, if it's like a high roll, that's fine. Let a high roll be a high roll. But if you can consistently pull off just certain things, it kind of makes things trivial at that point. Yeah. I honestly think that if there is an area that needs to be, and this surprised me, I think the Shardtail Queen is one of the most reliable
champions going into Last Divinity these days, and I did not ever expect that. But I think just the way, at least I don't know what your experience is looking at different builds, but just the way that Imperialist builds is such reliable wave clear, and it's so easy to scale with even one rank of royalty and any decent imp at all. Like that kind of blew me away. I've done that now a few times, and I have not yet so far lost a run with the Shardtail Queen, which is strange.
I also think the imp infusions are kind of OP.
They're very good.
Yeah.
It's you cram a lot of value into a single pip space, and
right. Put it on endless. Now you've got you can armor your whole floor. You can get 5 rage to the whole floor on top of the armor. Like there's just so much. You can get a consumable back.
Yeah.
So many things you can get.
Tombs, similar with Tombs. Tombs also, their value is incredible. And what's really interesting for me was the discovery that the incant infusions are pretty trash. Turns out that +1/1 and +1 rage is garbage.
Right.
And I think the only one that's useful at all is Guardian Stone. The rest of them are all just nerfed versions.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take
Glacial Seal.
I'll take
Glacial
a
Seal
a Siren of the Sea just if I have a strong incant deck just to keep them alive versus the sweep, and it's often enough. But yeah, it's pretty garbage in general. I agree.
Yeah, it's crazy. Some of the units that I don't know. So let me put it this way. So there's some power creep in the game that doesn't really actually add power. Some fusions that are just objectively not worth taking and actually are a downgrade to the original unit. Basically, from my opinion, that's almost anything that adds capacity at this point. Capacity has become such a commodity, more so than it ever was before.
Yeah.
And I basically, unless I have an incredibly important reason to do it, I will never add a capacity fusion onto a unit. I just find capacity is way too difficult to manage.
Yeah, I agree. It's they're good, but not really worth the capacity most of the time, just because it's so hard to. I mean, on that note, what have you guys been thinking about multi-floor setups? I feel like I do it even less now. It's pretty much always single floor with me now. I
do 2. I will do Shardtail Queen multi-floor setups occasionally.
Oh yeah, that makes sense probably.
And MR. Melting Remnant I will do multi-floor setups if I'm specifically not playing Firelight. So non-Firelight builds I'll almost always do multi-floor. But that makes sense because you typically just have insane amounts of units that you have to dump places.
I mean, unless you're counting a Titan Sentry, he always gets his own floor.
Honestly, though, even Titan Sentry, I've had a harder time playing than I did before.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I agree. It does way less, but it still clears out damage shields, and weakens units so that you can kill them.
I find that you basically have to fuse him on himself. It's almost mandatory to get the 5 rather than the 3. But it's just interesting. So some comments. Upgrade capacity. Okay. Yeah, I think so. Man, how to get into this? So maybe we can structure this a little bit. So in terms of the individual clans, I don't think that any of the rare units necessarily pushed one into an insane space. Maybe Apex Imp I think is quite strong and pretty reliable. The other ones I don't think nearly as reliable as Apex Imp in terms of just raw power. But then looking at Hallowed Halls, I feel like Hallowed Halls is just so much better than all the other additions. Even if you are, playing a Firelight build, I don't know. It's funny how ridiculously good that card can be, and it's not hard, I think, to make work really well. So that, apart from Hallowed Halls being just insanely strong, I think the other ones didn't necessarily push any of the clans over the top. The new neutrals, I don't think also pushed much over the top. Honestly, the only neutral like addition that I think is almost always good is Sinner Salve, and that's only is this called Sinner Salve or am I saying it?
That's the artifacts.
Yeah, is almost always good, especially if you're doing into any type of garbage deck, so either Diligent or Garbage Fell. But even Divinity, like I find I don't mind taking them almost any time. But apart from that, Hallowed Halls is as fun as it is broken. Yes, it is as fun as it is broken. I think it's exactly the right way to say it.
The animation is so long on Hallowed Halls.
That is very true. It is very slow. That is the only issue.
Yeah.
The units come back very slowly.
Not a speed running strategy.
No, not at all. But molding also was very slow, even after they addressed the single molding unit thing.
I got a minor complaint.
Okay.
It's so they added the hide button for Cheater's Hand, which I love, but they didn't really add it for anything else. I feel like that should just be there for like those times where there's so many times where it's like, oh crap, I need to recheck the boss's health or something, and I'm just stuck on a screen for something. I'm trying to think of like a good example, like I don't know, maybe just a reform or something, or a return of a consume card, something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like they should just add that
in general across the board. Yeah.
Right.
No, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of times, like in the middle of a reform, when you want to go look and just double check what you have out there before you reform your unit. No, I get that.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the things that was brought up, and this is what I mentioned earlier, is the pre-balance. The balance does seem to be around Divinity. And I know Narninian, you mentioned that like getting 20-40 shards might not make a difference, but I think like imagine if you just merge a multi-strike onto a sweep unit and that's all you do. Like for me that's a huge benefit in contrast to just vanilla runs. For 20 shards, you get a multi-strike. Like I would take that deal almost any time. And so that's why I wonder, like, if these, and I would say it's probably up until around like 40, 60 shards, you start to see the effect a lot more. But like up between like 0 and 40, I feel like you can get enough power that it almost negates the run. I think there's enough combos in there that are strong enough and reliable that you're going to probably get 1 or 2 in every run. And then if that's all you do is you just fuse one unit, but then that one unit just completely negates how difficult the Seraph fight is. Like that's the part that I'm worried about. I don't know how often that happens because I haven't tested it myself too much, but I feel like that part could be problematic, or at least maybe less fun for players that aren't going for Divinity all the time. But I don't know. That's something I'd have to check with other players who have had more experience.
Yeah, with us only going for Divinity.
Yeah, I feel like the majority of people may not actually go for Divinity. I don't have any real data to back that up other than just screenshots that I see a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff posted is still beating Seraph.
Right. And it seemed like, just using another game, Slay the Spire, as an example, most people don't actually seem to go for the heart if you go for just your common player. But yeah, I think when you get to our level of getting deep into the game, it doesn't feel right not going for the end boss, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Feels like an incomplete run if I don't actually face Divinity. It's super disappointing.
So, I mean, the parts that I like, I mentioned the one already. I really like with shards comes a risk reward, right? So you get power creep, but power creep with a cost. It's not free. You pay that cost in more difficult enemies. I also like that it affects the whole run. That's something that I think is quite good. A 100 shard Seraph is very different than a 0 shard Seraph. It just is objectively harder. And there have been runs where you lose to Seraph. I mean, I don't think I restart nearly as much to Seraph, but certainly more at 100 shards than I did at 0 shards. So I like that. I like that it's not a, how do I say this? It's not like you're just going for Divinity and that's it. Like that's the only thing that makes it harder. It's that everything you are going to be having to deal with the effect of your shards for every fight for the rest of the game. And I like that a lot. I think that's a smart way to implement it.
Yeah. Um, what have you guys been doing about like early shards? For me, I've noticed the early shards seem the most like impactful. Like if I have to take 40, 50 shards early on, that's gonna. I better hope that I made an OP deck or I'm dead. Like there's some brutal things early on.
there's I think. And this is maybe another complaint that I have with the shard mechanic, is I don't feel like shards affect all bosses equally. I think Talos is significantly harder. I think Daedalus is not harder at all. I don't think it...
Right.
You get 6 health bombs. Okay.
Right.
But like...
Hopefully if you've spent shards, hopefully you spent some on some damage, right?
Yeah, or at least sustain through the damage of the bombs. But that's completely different from a Talos that's hitting you for 16. Like it's just not
16 to 20 a turn.
It's not comparable.
Stacks of life steal and everything too.
Similar with Fel. Like Fel, I think is just objectively more difficult than it was before. I think in most cases, but I think even more now. Fel is just a lot harder with shards than Arcus.
Yeah,
and then on the Seraphites themselves. I actually think that, to be honest, Patient is a lot easier now than the others.
Yeah, 100%.
Turns out that having more multi-strike is way more difficult to deal with. So I think it's something where I would like to see more balance. That it's the shard impact is equally valid no matter the run. Right. I don't like the idea that I could like go in and say, okay, I'm playing Patient, I can take all the shards I want because I know that's going to be a cakewalk fight.
Yeah. Whereas Diligent, he's going to have stealth for 15 rounds.
Diligent's going to be a nightmare, and the units are going to be a nightmare because they're going to come with 30 health and 20 armor. So it's like it's just completely different kind of challenge there. Yeah, I mean, we mentioned this a little bit. I think, and this is my opinion, I think that Hallowed Hall's level of addition was probably too much for Melting Remnant. I think that Steelsinger is too little of an impact. I think it's, I don't know, arguably I've had the hardest time making it work than any of the other units. And Steelsinger is the permanently scaling rejuvenation unit. I think my biggest problem is when you're taking Steelsinger, you're taking Sentient. And if you're taking Sentient, you are restoring Sentient in like 99% of the cases. And so then you have this problem where you have a big fat unit that, unless it has like 5 multi-strike, isn't going to carry you no matter what its damage number is. And this is where I think the balance of... So maybe come back to it. I like the theoretical. I like the risk management of the shard taking with power. I like that each of the clans got some type of power creep. I don't think it was equally distributed, both in terms of shard power creep and in terms of clan power creep, which I think is, I think it's hard to criticize that, because I think it's a much harder thing to pull off correctly, is balanced power creep. But I think the theoretical way they implemented it is actually really good, and I think the payoff is quite good most of the time. There's just some areas where I think there could be a little bit more balance in that, and how things changed.
It's pretty unique too. I do like that it's affecting the whole run, not just sort of stacking up like you said. On that note, though, what do you think about the RNG on the actual shard map events? Like I'm not a fan of Ring 2, the RNG present there personally. A lot of times you'll get a Divine Temple, but no unit other than a Train Steward to infuse with it. I think if they want to do that, I'd be more fine with them just always guaranteeing unit draft as the reward for Ring 1. Mm-hmm. I feel like that would just be an overall net more fun thing. And then it also makes... I feel the divine boons, when you get offered that instead of relic on the Ring 1, I feel like it makes that more enticing, because then it's like that's the only way you can get extra gold. Whereas right now, I feel like when I see divine boons, I'm just like, well, wish that was a relic, right? Or an artifact.
Or wish I had it on a shop floor where it might actually be relevant.
Right. Give me some immediate benefit rather than just nothing.
No, I totally agree. worst thing I think you can see is 2 palaces on ring 2 and 3, and then never again. And I had that in a run.
It's sad.
Honestly, I wouldn't mind if it got standardized to be something like you have palaces on 3, 5, and 8, and everything in between is going to be boons or artifacts, and you say ring 0 or limbo is always an artifact. I think that would be fine and wouldn't actually detract from the experience. I don't think that RNG adds as much as shop RNG, banner RNG to the game.
Agreed. And I think it's just a net overall more fun experience. Less frustrating, we'll say.
Okay, let's talk about new clans. So it's been in my chat. What's been your impressions of how Wormkin stacks up against the others? Do you think that it's objectively better, objectively worse? Do you think it's equal in power level? I'm curious. Not necessarily like how good is the clan in terms of, or how fun, but just like what do you think the power level is relative to the others?
I think it's right in the mix. And I'm still learning the clan, so they may even be more powerful once I actually fully grasp every kind of deck that you can build. But I think the champs are pretty good. I think I don't love Echorite as much as everyone does. I think it only has one super good path. I don't really like Marshlord or the armor one, but that could just be me not understanding what to do with that. But the Spine Chief to me seems like one of the best champs in the game. To me, the Corruption path is probably the most OP path maybe of every unit or every champ. But I also like that you can basically flex between them and not really lose much. If I don't get the 20 plus damage, I can at least add Strike, for example, and I'm gaining through Relentless every single time I'm getting echoes, so you're pretty much guaranteed to kill the boss as long as you have health on your champ. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts.
Narninian, any thoughts so far from you?
Yeah, so I probably have played the least Wormkin. I'm just finishing my last combination right now, but I've had a lot of strong with specific champion paths, like the one that returns a consume spell seems very good. I haven't done any reaping path for Spine Chief. As far as the units go, I feel like it's a little tricky because the units that benefit from having the candy or whatever they're called on the floor,
charged echoes.
Charged echoes on the floor are I think they're very bad if it's your secondary clan and you're not putting all of your efforts in there. So there's a lot of cards that are like sink or swim, and I mean that's the case. There's a lot of mechanics like that. Like obviously burnout extension would be similar. Like you don't really want to do a little bit of burnout extension, but I think I would, in my experience, agree that it's pretty balanced against the other clans. I don't have a lot of experience with it to say for sure.
I find it very interesting that the crossover, like the crossover of things meeting between the clans, is fueled entirely by Infuse. Because I don't feel like actually there's a lot of crossover between Wormkin and the other clans in terms of other mechanics. So let me give there's
there's incant at least.
But even the incant and infuse are not necessarily equal, right? Like incant is going to be basically no matter what. If you're playing spells at all, it doesn't matter. But etch and infuse are very specific, and I think yeah, sure, Kaerius, if you want to jump in, feel free. And I think that the fact that infuse and etch are so situational reduce their reliability to a large extent compared to incant, but give a similar level of effect. So take for example, you have infuse +2 damage +2 armor. That is native Siren of the Sea incant. Right, so it's no different. It's just objectively worse because it only incants.
A pip.
Yeah, and it has an extra
yeah.
pip. So it's a 3 pip unit, and it's more situational. The only exception, and it is literally the only exception, is that you can play it with a Spine Chief and get infuse off of non-cards.
Right.
But in terms of like just incant versus infuse, I feel like infuse is not good enough. I think it needs to be balanced around the fact that it's rarer. That's one thing that I haven't loved, especially when you get, as you mentioned, Narninian, when you get secondary clan Wormkin, is I feel like infuse struggles because you don't have the engines for it. Spine Chief and specifically bringing back Consume enable infuse in a way that you just don't get naturally, I think, out of the clans.
Yeah, you can make it work, but you kind of have to pigeon yourself into only taking the infuse card options, which then you're kind of up to RNG at that point. It's like now I have to skip okay cards that I would take normally, but they're not infused, and I might just have to take something that's utterly pretty much useless, but it's infused, and I need infusions now to make Wormkin work. So it's like you kind of have to say, I'm going to abandon Wormkin as my secondary and just go all in on my primary. Take okay cards.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really strong extract cards that don't require you to go all in on it. I mean, you just rely on what infused you have, like the enhancements that are basically better than the Awoken versions, but obviously have the extract cost, and then you have like the dazes and the big spells. So I like those spells. The ones that are like do damage per echo, though, that's really tough to splash in.
They also don't play too nicely with eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's just because they're eating up your echoes.
I mean, there's some eggs that are good, like Gorgers or something, but
that's actually another thing I was going to mention is I just only recently learned in my last couple of runs, but eggs don't gorge. And I feel like this is something that is also a little bit problematic. If you basically are forced to not go egg builds in Umbra unless I guess you can do what I ended up doing in my run, which was to have an insane amount of units, and some of those are eggs. But that kind of surprised me. So you can't gorge with eggs. I mean, it makes sense in terms of like. What?
I'm confused. I thought
no, eggs don't gorge.
What happens to the morsels?
They just stay there, and then when your unit comes out, then they'll gorge them.
I've had eggs with gorge, so
you sure?
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, I just played it. I can check my VOD again, but I'm pretty sure that eggs don't naturally gorge on their own. Did you have eggs with any other unit, or is it just literally eggs and morsels on the floor?
Maybe it was a different unit gorging. It's weird.
Because I know, like, I had it. There were two cases that showed up for me. One was I just played an egg Echo Right build, and Echo Right gorged every time. So Echo Right was getting all the gorges, and then the second time was I had an egg solo build, and they just stayed. They stuck around, and then finally when the bogflies came out, the bogflies.
That was just me being a noob. I guess it must have been a different unit gorging. I thought they were gorging the whole time.
I haven't actually frontlined with an egg to know, but that's interesting. I didn't know about that mechanic.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be epic, and then it didn't work out. Like
I think I did have an egg, an egg unit with morsel made, so they gorged.
You know what? Actually, I lied. Morsel Maid's insane. Morsel Maid is actually insane and can come up with some of the craziest builds. I was thinking about Steel Singer. I was thinking about
Eel Gorgon.
Yeah, which are both for me major letdowns. But
Eel Gorgon, I'm not let down by Eel Gorgon.
You like it? I couldn't make it work the few times I've taken it.
I mean, it saved a run for me. I mean, it's so much damage. But
Eel Gorgon is great if you have a tank in front of it. And
it's not a good
scale
tank.
it.
That was the problem for me, is I feel like you have to play with either Wormkin or Awoken. I guess you could scale with rage, but then the rage goes away. This is the problem: is you can't scale with non-stat enhancements, and that for me is what kind of put me off. Although you do have a really cool combo that you can also put burnout, and you don't have to ever worry about it. So I guess you could go MR and take a what's it called? Wicklash. That's pretty good. But in general, also, you missed that.
That was one of the units that I didn't mind having a Siren of the Sea infusion, obviously Harvest infusion would be better, but even the 1 damage like per incant is pretty strong
when you have like 10 multi-strike or something.
Yeah.
Is anyone else's Discord bugging out, or is it just me?
Mine seems okay.
Mine. Okay, it's just I don't know. Then. You don't want to know what's going on in mine right now. It's pretty horrific.
Okay, so let me say my opinion on Wormkin is, I think as a primary clan, it's incredibly strong. As Gabriot already said, I think that both champions are quite strong. Actually, I am more and more liking egg builds over time, and I think Marsh Lord has a place that fits okay if you can play it right. I think it does require more setup than a lot of the other champions do to be successful. Spine Chief, I actually like all paths. I think all of them are viable, which is certainly not the case with Echo Right. I think armor gain Echo Right just can't. You basically don't win because of the champion. You win because of the rest of your deck being able to carry. And I don't know if you have different opinion there, Kaerius, but I would go Repeater or Marsh Lord every time.
Yeah, I would go Repeater if it's shown every time.
Yeah.
But I've seen on the Discord that there are some players who think that the armor path is the strongest.
Interesting.
And it can be if you have the support cards for it. If you get something like the Wormkin etchings and or broken memories, you can really armor up a lot.
That's a fair point.
I think you said you've had a lot of luck with the kin host egg, right, Kaerius? I'm curious to know what your strategy is there, because I've not been having luck with that banner. It's like really hard for me to hatch it.
It's the there's 2 ways you can hatch it pretty easily, and one of them is with accelerated incubation, which isn't all that common to see, unfortunately. And the other one is the hardened hull artifact that removes 3 pips, 3 shell, and gives it 30 armor. That makes it significantly easier to hatch, and also just bring a lot of infused cards.
Yeah, Viable, feel free to jump in. Just messaged me or in the chat. Yeah, so maybe to just kind of summarize my thoughts, and maybe we can then talk about it in general. So individual clan power creep, I feel like they're more or less the same vanilla, excluding all the other mechanics. Just like pure, if you play the clans as you did before, with the exception of Hallowed Halls, I feel like not much has changed, right? So there's not really a lot of like just vanilla power creep, unless someone has a different example. But I don't see a lot of like, yeah, okay, the clans have shifted around, excluding again all the other mechanics.
I definitely think melting has gotten a lot stronger.
You think so?
Yeah, I think their infusions are the most powerful. I think that, like, for instance, actually, we were talking about like 1 pip infusions not being worth it. I do think actually the sludge bosses is you can add the 5 rage harvest at the cost of a pip to any unit, and that can be pretty insane.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
And then those tomb units are just insane. Like you can infuse encasement with itself, and then you almost don't even need endless. You can just dupe it a few times, and you're stealth for the important rounds of the fight. Yeah, and Hallowed Halls, of course, are just game winning.
I showed up and we immediately start talking about molten encasement.
So we're talking about but I would say the examples that you gave there are not like vanilla didn't change. If you don't take shard stuff, nothing's really changed in terms of like I think Hallowed Halls actually did dramatically improve MR as a rare card because I think it's such a good spell. And it's there's very few MR builds that won't take a Hallowed Hall or Hallowed Halls because it's so strong. But if you look at all the others, even the most OP ones, I feel like you already had OP builds vanilla, so I don't think that changed too much. When we started getting into the shards,
I want to mention.
Oh, go ahead.
I want to mention one other build as well that really got a lot stronger with the DLC.
Okay.
And that's imp builds.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think that Shardtail Queen is one of the most reliable DLC champions, which is surprising to me. I did not expect that at all. And I think currently the mix of it's either it's Rally 2 plus 1 Imperial is the best combo in the game right now in terms of reliability. Because you have incredible scaling and you have incredibly reliable AoE out of a champion.
Yeah, I think she was extremely strong before, and especially now. I mean, you have to consider the things that Divinity added that you really have to consider when you're building your decks. The three main things that I can think of are an increased need for a lot more generic stuff, so your chunky frontline damage, and then your ability to either multi-strike into a backline or sweep backliners somehow. And Shardtail Queen specifically of all champions was the one that already just kind of did those things. I've always thought she's kind of absurd in that she is this, when you combine Rally Imperialist, she is this chunky frontline damage dealer that can nuke down the sharded bosses. And she's also this way to clear these massive backline waves of 5 or 6 units that come in the Divinity waves. So none of that changed. And the emphasis on just being able to deal with generic things in waves, I think with Divinity has really been a big boon for her.
Not to mention that the imps have some of the best fusions in the game right now. They're just incredibly strong.
Yeah. I think the imp essences and the tomb essences are generally the best on rate. Which is very interesting given the size of the cards. You would think that they would make some of the splashier cards also have splashier essences, but it tends to be, I think that they do come off as splashy and very thick in terms of text, but they're also very clunky. You know, you look at like Paraffin Enforcer's essence, like it can just be kind of tough to put that on something and have that thing work the way you want it to, because some units it works with well, some units it doesn't, but also you're throwing that burnout on. I think they have a lot going on with some of those more complex units, but simplicity really seems to be kind of like the name of the game when it comes to infusing units.
I do think that, and again, I really like the infuse as a power creep. I think it makes sense. It's one of those again that's balanced by the fact that the game becomes harder when you infuse. But similar to my other complaints, I feel like it's not broadly balanced. As you said, there are just objectively, and there was always going to be objectively better essences. That was going to happen. You can't make it all the way balanced. But I do feel like there are too many units that have lackluster essences that just don't work. Either because they require too much capacity or because they just don't do any value at all. I mean, minus three in cost on a unit applies to 2 units in the game, maybe 3. Right. And I don't know, it just seems very strange how some of the essences got decided. But in general, I actually like it a lot.
I think my favorite one is the Glacial Seal versus Guardian Totem infusion. So you have Glacial Seal, which is a 2 cost, and it gets the full value of its infusion. But then Guardian Totem has a 1 cost. It gets a negative with its infusion. Granted, it's a small one, but I always thought that was kind of funny. Like, almost implies maybe Glacial Seal needs to be a 1 cost, or maybe even Guardian should be a 2 cost. I don't know. Something's up there, but not a huge complaint, just a funny one, I feel.
There's a handful of those.
Okay.
No, that was it.
Yeah, I think the game has gone in a very interesting way, which is a a lot of people were talking about before last Divinity came out, maybe lean towards more combo decks. A lot of people were thinking that the power level of Divinity was going to be something where you just had to build these insane combo decks or decks that popped off in some way, and that was the only way you were going to beat Divinity consistently, kind of similar to fighting the Heart in STS, and then it just didn't pan out that way. What tended to happen was the benefit that you get just from putting essences on a unit and maybe duping that unit, or building up insane spells and putting holdover or spell chain on them, just tends to be enough to counter the things that, the increased difficulty that comes with it. I think a lot more of the mid-range builds have actually just been perfectly fine, but there is this weird imbalance where some of the combos that were already very good have, had this, just increased ability to play mid-range decks and be perfectly fine. You get a little bit of benefit, you get a little extra cost, things kind of balance out. But some of the weaker combos at dealing with specific things, like some of these chunkier units or some of these wide waves, dealing with things that are very healthy, have had to become more combo centric. And I think we've seen that evolve over the last couple weeks. Like, when do you play an Awoken deck and not have it be a combo deck? Or when do you play an Echo Right deck and not have it be a combo deck and work out?
I think
it's very weird.
And this is I don't want to keep repeating myself, but my biggest complaint during the beta is my still biggest complaint of the game right now, which is that the last Divinity has too much power in its units, and the fact that all the power is in the units means that having decks that can deal AoE, large AoE, is mandatory now. Versus, I mean, if you can deal with the waves, have you seen a deck that dealt with the waves and couldn't deal with Relentless? I've not yet had one. If you can get through the waves, you can get through Relentless, you're going to kill Divinity. Like, that's going to happen. And for me, that's a little bit weird that so much of the power is crammed into the units and not into the Divinity itself. Yeah, it gets +7 damage, but it's like, I don't know.
Well, also, just so many decks don't even make it to Relentless.
Yeah. That's the thing, is you peter out. Which Seraph was different. Seraph was very much like, you get to old, pre-DLC, you get to Seraph and you're doing 25 out of 3,500 health. And
right.
That's where you'd lose. That doesn't, at least, again, my experience has been that doesn't happen with Divinity. You die because you leak units to the pyre and they kill you. And
I was going to say, there's something interesting in that vein, which is also, you don't tend to lose your waves that often. You don't tend to lose your floors. I think the defensive options gained were really, really incredible relative to the offensive options. So you mostly just die to leaks, and I don't think that that's actually as enjoyable of an experience as struggling to keep your floor alive.
You have a couple of cases. You'll have the spike floors that will just wreck your sweeps. That will happen. Mm-hmm. You'll have, occasionally you'll get like multi-strikers that will kill your frontliner. But I totally agree. I think there are enough tools that were added and enough ways to use, like temple upgrades to deal with survival. Like, certainly survival is not nearly as big of a deal as it was. But yeah, leaks, and like the boss leaks, you leak a single boss and you just die. You leak any floor that has spikes and you die. Like, it's very interesting that's become the new loss compared to how it was in the past.
I feel like they should add like if you get to 200 shards, that's like the quote unquote true like final boss, and then it's just something insane.
I've been doing a lot of the 200 shard runs.
Yeah, I've noticed you. But you've given me some ideas, Kaerius. I think we talked about this at the beginning. It really does seem like past a certain point, you can just keep taking shards and it's not going to really hurt you. It's just going to help you. Like, the scaling doesn't seem exponential, or not what's what I'm looking for, parabolic. It's more just linear. So if you can make some insane 30 damage piercing spells, why not? Why not infuse every unit you can? Why not just make the most OP deck? And sure, maybe you get a few more 30 health backliners that do 100 damage, but they're never going to hit you, so what's it matter?
I would like to see a little more. Oh, go ahead.
I found that the floor that really shows you whether you made a good call on taking a lot of shards early is ring 4. It's just, if you can make it through ring 4, you can take every shard the rest of the way. You'll find. But Ring 4 can really just kill you right there if you were not ready for the heavies.
Oh yeah, I get those double buffed up resolve climber dudes, whatever they're called.
180 health or.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because Ring 4 was always kind of a check, and that was largely just due to the uniqueness of the bosses, and then also I think you can get your first encounter with a Clipped Guardian there. But mainly the unique bosses. You have the first Scourge boss and also Spike's boss, which are two like more unique checks than a lot of other decks. Like you can't just throw chump blockers against the Scourge boss, and you can't just play like an unprotected Tethys against Spike's boss. I think Ring 4 was always a really, really strong tech. I don't find myself taking shards early. I usually just try to plan out like how late can I afford to take shards.
I think it's the difference between the kind of builds, and I kind of am in the same boat. It's the 100 shard versus the 200 shard builds, and I think I lean toward 100 shard builds and trying to play between 120, 140 maybe, but normally that's where I sit. But I have been doing some off-stream runs where you just go all in on 200 plus, and it's surprisingly reliable. And you just take everything, and it's kind of crazy how much value. I didn't expect it to be as smooth as I thought it would. I do say you do get wrecked early. You get wrecked by, in particular, Talos. I feel like also wrecks you hard. If you go into extreme Talos and you're not ready, you will lose. But after that, I feel like if you could handle extreme Talos, you can handle extreme 4. You're gonna smooth all the way to Divinity. And so it's a weird. I don't know. I didn't expect that. I thought it would be exactly that you should always take late shards, and I don't know if that's always the case now, as I have been playing recently. But again, this is only like 2 or 3 runs where that's been the case for me.
Yeah.
I would have really liked a lot more modality, I think, in the last Divinity fight. So something more akin to having the different seraphs. Obviously, they built modality into which floor you play, but the waves are very, very, very standardized. And I also find, again, it just tends to be a can you punch through and can you clear waves type of combat. I think STS goes on the other end of this, and they do it a little bit wrong with the Heart, which is it counters these storm type decks. It counters these combo decks or decks that try to play a lot of things in one turn. The Heart has this specific mechanic. I think that would actually be fine if you weren't always facing the Heart. The problem with having a consistent, very unique counter inside your final boss is that it just completely invalidates strategies 100% of the time. I think Seraph actually does this pretty well, which is you'll run into a version of Seraph that will invalidate a certain subset of strategies, and then you pick the strategies that are not currently invalidated by any of the bosses that you're facing. I think Divinity would have been much more interesting if it had something similar to that, things that tackled you on a different axis than just waves.
Yeah, 100% agree there. Like, I do wish you'd just either the version of Seraph, really had a correlation to what you're going to face in Divinity, or alternatively, just similar to Seraph, have an indication of some, maybe we don't need 4 different versions of Divinity, but just, different ones that you can prepare for that present really hard counters to certain play styles. Like we've kind of talked about sweepers. Sweepers are just almost unstoppable. It'd be nice if there was a version of Divinity that really just doesn't allow you to do sweepers, so you actually have to use some of the other Awoken units, right? Like when I play Awoken now, unless I just want to experiment, I might as well just take Husk or Shattered Shell when I see it, because I know it's almost a free win at that point. I'd like it if they maybe forced me to try to take some tanks and whatnot sometimes, but as it stands, a quick sweeper will get you through the game almost every time.
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that we would be discussing if we were just to go down a list of modes for Divinity would be really, really straightforward, involve very simple mechanics that have already been built into a lot of bosses, and clearly counter strategies that we found to be very relevant against Divinity. So something like a really, really heavy spikes version of Divinity could counter your sweepers very hard. Something to counter your more like combo decks with spells could be, some kind of taxing Divinity, something in the realm of either Seraph the Patient or Scourge Fell. There's a lot of different options that I think are very, very simple, and I don't think it would be very tough to design some very unique modes to Divinity.
I mean, my thought was, this is my brainstorm. I wouldn't mind if the bosses were bosses. Like you had eight sets of units that were representing the 8 rings, or maybe you do 6 or 5 or whatever. You represent them and have a similar shard mechanic like Arcus does that affect that floor, but it's known. It's known. You know what they're going to be. The mode tells you that, and it's having to deal with the regular bosses, and then you deal with the last divinity with that same mode. That I think would be cool, and I would like the idea if he wasn't. I mean, maybe I'm in the wrong here, but I would like if you couldn't fly and kill him. I think you would have. I like the idea of divinity being you have to face every boss again, one floor at a time, going through relentless after relentless after relentless, and then you hit the last divinity. And I like the idea of there being a modality to there will be a factor at play that affects every one of those relentless fights. I think that could be really interesting, but I don't know. That was my thought.
I'd agree on the flying kill. I mean, I'd be fine if you couldn't fly and kill him. I often find I'm just not going to relentless, and I don't. It's kind of funny. It's funny, but I don't know if it's necessarily always. It could get stale after a while if I'm just never having to face the boss. But as we've already said, it's also just easy in relentless generally. Yeah. So I think if 2 things there: make relentless harder, but then also, I think if you couldn't, at least make it harder to get a flying kill. If you can get one, like there needs to be maybe some, I don't know, some heal or something like he heals 300 health. I don't know what the number would be, but just throwing out a number there per turn or something. Or maybe on the card infinite thing, maybe we say that he heals based on card played or something, and even gains some buffs or stats or whatnot. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to make life harder on us, but I think we'd have more fun as a result.
I think we could actually knock 2 birds out with one stone here. Me and Tom were talking a lot the other day about how certain cards and artifacts that already were in kind of an iffy place but may give you some options, and some clans that have problems dealing with wide waves are just kind of invalidated by having a floating boss sit there on the floor. So cards that say random targets and stuff like Golden Teeth, like you really didn't need your Umbra deck that has its only backline clear being Golden Teeth to struggle anymore by making so the Golden Teeth can never get away.
Yeah, that's always a pet peeve of mine, is those flying bosses should
not be affected by stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't even mind. So the one of the other balance things that comes out is Hoarfrost Effigy. If you can't target bosses with Hoarfrost Effigy until they're relentless, you solve the problem without nerfing Frostbite, 1,000 feet in the ground. And so I think you're totally right. I think something like that could trim what they wanted to trim with Purify, which I don't love. I don't think Purify in its current state is particularly great. But I also think that at the same time, it does make some things extra frustrating that didn't need to be. Yeah.
It also feels like Purify is just kind of like a mode. Like that could just be a mode, maybe even like a more extreme version of it. I mean, you already have one there. Just toss in 2 more that feel very unique from the Seraph mode. So you at least have to like plan to fight on 2 different axes as you're climbing up. And I don't know. It feels like something very, very straightforward. Also, the things you could build into it would also help you counter the strategies that have become super prevalent and super consistent things, like Gabriot was saying, which is, just throwing a Shattered Shell on the floor and hitting in turn. Like it's not tough to counter those things. I think again the 2 key problems that you're going to have are sweeping strategies with units and really heavy spell-based strategies that play just a lot of cards in one turn. So if you just build a mode for each of those and then leave the Purify as a separate mode to counter your random Frostbite and Reap decks, I think you'd be in a good spot with that.
I also think what would be really good is to, and to a certain extent, not nerf, but maybe challenge single floor setups. And you could do that with Harvest, with Incant, with Rally. And if you had it, it's like it does now, because, Last Divinity is not 1 unit, he's 3 units. I just did a video on this. He's actually 3 units. And I think that I like that idea, keep that idea. But imagine if you had something as simple as Harvest gain spikes. Your sweep units they're going to die. They're going to die. They're going to kill themselves because they're going to just kill themselves against ever-increasing spikes from all of the harvests on that floor. So I think there are ways to do it that would be really cool, and also push multi-floor decks, which I think you can do them, but I don't see it as often.
Yeah, I've hardly done any multi-floors against Divinity, and honestly, I've found I'm able to go top almost every time. Like, you'd think the sweeping would be harder, but there's just so much ways to just counter it, and then you get 2 free shots in, you get time to scale. I mean, just a simple dazed, sap, just armor, if you can infuse 2 units with a steelworker, that's enough to do it at 100 shards. Because it's only like 9 or 10 attack. Yeah, just a lot of ways to counter that top floor.
2 of the things you mentioned go really hand in hand, which is I've been wondering a lot why people have been shifting a lot more towards 1-floor decks. I mean, good players obviously recognized very early on in the game that 1-floor setups were generally better. But I think we've seen a migration even amongst good players to go more towards having consistent 1-floor setups. And if you are playing a 2nd floor, it's usually just a chump floor or some kind of like throwaway things for value floor, like a Titan Sentry, or your Spine Chief. And I think a lot of what that comes down to is that the game has actually become a lot more setup heavy with some of the rares and strategies that have been leaned hard into here. And when you're setup heavy, top floor is easily worth, whatever other costs you might incur by playing top floor. Just a full extra turn, even when we had days, was worth the days. Like a full extra turn with setup is just so important. I would actually like to see the game migrate a little bit away from setup heavy strategies. I think it used to be that your Awoken Hellhorn deck wasn't very setup heavy. That was the deck that, at least to the greatest degree, was build up a strong set of units and some decent spells, but you can kind of just play them and press in turn. Whereas a lot of the newer clans that were made, like Melting Remnant or Umbra, are really just built up around these setup strategies. I'm not sure how we migrate to non-setup strategies at this point, though.
Certainly not with the Divinity fight as it is.
Need some way to punish them.
I guess there's also the factor of when you infuse your units, you lose banner units, so it even just makes it harder to pull off a multi-floor setup because you're not having as many banner units.
And the consolidation, you're putting so much power into a single unit. You want to make sure that unit is getting as much power as possible. And especially in like the example you gave with, sweep, you typically want to dump everything into that sweep unit. And then this is the same issue I had with a lot of other builds as well, is like,
right.
It's why I have a problem with Steel Singer, is because you take Steel Singer typically in Sentient decks, and Sentient decks you want to heal the Sentient. So it's like there's a little bit of a, I don't know.
And they could maybe add like something that gives something to the floor above them or below or both. That could maybe incentivize. But that would be a big rework. You'd have to rework a lot of units and spells.
I mean, imagine this. One thought I had was like little things like, what if Hef added capacity below or above her rather than on her floor? Like, I feel like, I don't know. The Wingmaker, Wingmaker builds are hilarious, but they also like. Are you really going to play multiple floors with Wingmaker? No, you're gonna pack a single floor because it's so much more valuable to put so much into a single floor. And
right,
yeah,
Can I come up with a dissenting opinion here?
Sure.
I've been playing more 2-floor setups than I did before. It's quite easy to get 2 or even 3 infused units fully charged up, even with just if you have to dupe, you dupe. Go to the temples, and if you don't get the sweep, you really need more units. You can't just have one unit kill everything unless it's sweep or Dante, maybe the Gorgon. So without sweep, you really have to go with a 2-floor setup where you have something like 1 floor with heavy hitter up front, and the next floor you have all the smaller multi-strike things. And it also works well to if you have a egg build that we talked about earlier. If you can hatch the eggs fast, the endless eggs or reform eggs is definitely a thing. I've done both, and they kill the divinity. There is some leaking problems with them because there's a lot of setup. But I've gone 3 whole floors full of Kinhost pupa, the Kinhost egg units. And just at that point, you're just wrecking everything.
Yeah, to me, it feels like. Okay, good.
I just have a great hope that Kaerius decides to start uploading his runs soon, because I'm super interested in his in your playstyle, Kaerius. I hope you start uploading some runs, because I'd be super interested in. Because I've seen you talk about this before, like Kinhost. I really want to see like the right strategy to get that to work, because I feel like it could be insane, but I'm just missing something.
I did really like the only thing I've come close to like with a similar type of build was I did take endless on a what is it, I can't remember the name. It's the egg that spawns the bog flies, and
Bogfly host.
Yep, it's bogfly host, and then fused bogfly host onto bogfly host, and then I could play that very easily on multiple floors because you get 4 bogflies per egg and so on. That was kind of cool. But and then hallowed halls builds, I find you can do multi floors easy because you just play hallowed halls and you get an entire floor.
Right.
It's I don't know. It's interesting. So I have to say, a lot of this criticism, I think that the DLC made the game more interesting. Certainly made the game a lot more interesting than it had been for me for a long time.
Yeah, definitely for me as well.
I think, again, my only thing is we're gonna reach a point where the divinity is solved, and I don't know if that's so fun.
Right. I could see the game being easier.
Yeah,
To me, it felt easier already. I'm not sure. I feel like the tools given have more than compensated for the costs of taking those tools. There's a lot of like weird shifts that are more like horizontal shifts than vertical shifts in difficulty. It's just you're moving around the things you need to prioritize and the skills you need to build. So like what Kaerius hit on before was taking multi-floor setup so you can get more individual hits in to try and clear these wider waves. I think that's actually similar to what a lot of the rest of us have been doing. Just instead of going on multiple floors, we've been prioritizing individual strikes. Like I sit there and count the number of strikes that my floor has when I'm trying to build it. And then the size of those strikes to make sure I can actually hit through multiple units and I'm not dealing my damage in a chunky way, which used to not be a really big issue. But the strategy that Kaerius has is just, spreading your strikes out across multiple floors so you can generate, 6 or 7 or 8 of them as opposed to 4 or 5. I think there's a lot of these horizontal shifts in what you have to prioritize, the things you have to count. Like I've never sat around and counted my strikes before in a meaningful way in a game before. I was just like, does my wave deal enough damage? And that was my concern up till the last divinity. I think there's a lot of horizontal shifts in power level or in difficulty that have the illusion of a vertical shift in difficulty because we're trying to adapt to them right now. But I've already felt like the game is easier even having to make these adaptations. So I think the game is going to be significantly easier once people have really adjusted to, what things you need to prioritize and how you need to play the game.
Yeah, I've been saying for a while now that the DLC definitely made the game easier. But it also made it more complex, which I love.
Yeah, there's more to learn. There's more you can do. And for me, what I would hope would be like the next steps for the developers. I, to be honest, don't really think another clan is necessary. If they do another expansion, I don't think another full clan is necessary. I think what would be really good is more emphasis on enemy diversity than we have today. Because that, to me, is the part that, for me, still feels less diverse. The enemies are more or less known, especially the flying bosses and divinity, and I would like there to be where the emphasis goes in terms of additional content. How do I build against a foe that is different than I've had to face before? And this, I think, I mean, we're, as you said, we're doing this now. We're adapting now because Divinity is completely different than anything we faced before. But once we've made that adaptation, that's it. Like we're there. And I would like more variety in terms of enemy encounters.
There's definitely a lot of people who, like, really, really straightforwardly just want a wider set of tools in their hands, and that's what a new clan gives you. There's a lot of hype that you can build around that. I would actually like to see, instead of going more clans, I would actually like to see just a wider card pool within each of the current clans. A few more strategies built into each of them, making players be a little more flexible, and also just decreasing the consistency of runs. Like, I'm currently working on a video, which is my guide to that Shard Tail Queen primitive mold deck, and I'm going to go through my runs and pull out a lot of the data from them. But if I'm correct, I have a Wickless Baron in north of 80% of them. And that just feels a little bit excessive in terms of consistency. I'd like to see, you know, if you were going to do like a whole nother very, very large DLC, at least like, I don't know, 20 or 30% increase into each of the card pools that introduces one new kind of strategy or archetype into it. Something like that feels a little more interesting to me.
And I think tags are one of the things that are also really underutilized. You have Imp tag synergy, you have Morsel tag synergy, you have literally one Demon tag synergy. You have Tomb tag synergy, but you have so much other stuff. You have demons, you have hollows, you have, and there's no synergies with any of these tags to where it's like, okay, it's pure flavor. I'd love to see more tag oriented stuff.
I think there's a
me too.
Waxer tag. Or is there one?
Question for you. Which new mechanic do you think is the most broken?
Spell chain. I think spell chain creates combos that you could never do in vanilla. I think the rest makes some combos easier, but I think spell chain is, on the right cards, completely broken. A single card with spell chain can completely break a deck.
If it counts, I would say essences, but if we're talking about keywords, I'll readjust my answer.
I mean, I don't think it's broken, but I really appreciate it, and that's intrinsic. I think that adjusted some flaws. You relied so much on RNG in the original game, and I think that was a good upgrade that doesn't overpower anything.
I think it's ridiculous that we're still now several DLCs in and there's not a banner indicator on units. I don't know why this is not in there yet.
That is absurd, yeah.
Because, as I said, it's funny because I think some of you saw my Reddit post, some of the comments on the Reddit post, like, yeah, duh, this kind of thing. You wouldn't believe how many people have messaged me outside on Reddit and in Discord, messaged me to say they had no idea, and they have, you know, hundreds of hours in the game. They had no idea there was banner unit priority. So I think similar Narninian, knowing that you can have something guaranteed in your opening hand, while not OP, I think it does allow for consistency you never got in vanilla.
Yeah, especially now that it's more setup focused often. So you really need those setup cards. Like putting intrinsic on Space Prism is amazing.
I mean, my last run, right? Exactly. I don't know if you guys watched my last posted run, was exactly that. It was intrinsic on a spell chaining Space Prism. And then also I happen to have what is it called? The artifact that duplicates your consume. So I had 6 Space Prisms on turn 1. But yeah, like so the thing with me, there's a couple. -2 also, specifically because it enables infinites that weren't existing before. And I think I mentioned this already. Right. I think every single infinite in the game was buffed, and all of them first turn the last divinity. I don't do them because I think it's not fun, but every infinite will first turn last divinity, and all of them are easier to do than they were before. And I don't love that, to be honest. I think that's the one power creep that I think is objectively harmful, is the fact that you can do that. The biggest offender for me is Cycle of Life, Offering Monument. It's just an instant win. because anyway. But there's a couple of those that exist right now.
Do you guys want to know what the mechanic that I thought of when I asked the question?
Better
I
not
bet
be
it's,
shell.
I bet it's consume. My guess is consume return.
No, that's a good one, but no, it's hunger.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's
Oh.
good.
Is that morsel made?
Yeah. Morsel made.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
It's. I mean, I don't think of that as a mechanic because it's like a single unit. But
yeah.
yeah, that's good.
infuse morsel made into a sweeper, and you have a oh god, the scaling.
Yeah, I would say that was that in terms of like fun units. That's the most fun of the 4 units that got added is Morsel Mate because it's just hilarious to me, both the infusion and just the standalone unit. I think Apex Imp for me has been the most consistent still, but anyway, I don't know. But that's as I said, I don't love that. I don't love that infinite combos got better. And I would like to see something doing that. I mean, we talked about earlier, Gabriot, that we do something around like the last Divinity, hurting infinites, but I don't know. I don't know how to fix that. I think it's...
I will say, though, I'm hopeful. I mean, I got to say, not to blow smoke at the devs or anything, but like I would say they have probably the best track record I've ever seen of the speed to which they respond to things like this from the community. When they see that something's just OP or super unfun, they'll fix it usually within like a month or two, it seems like. And then the patch, I'm always pretty happy to see the patch notes. Like the changes always generally make sense, I'd say like 90% of the time, which is pretty unique, I think. Even other games that I love, like Slay the Spire, it'll take, I feel like, maybe 3 times as long for really the response that Shiny Shoe, it is Shiny Shoe, right? Yeah, Shiny Shoe does. So I wouldn't be surprised if these infinites do get nerfed, especially because.
By the way, Gabriot, you mentioned consumer retrieval. It's not actually a new mechanic.
Oh, that's
been
true.
a while. It's been around. You got the Imp Scholars.
Imp Scholars, yeah.
right.
The endless Imp Scholars and the Transcend Imps with Imp Scholars in the deck. You can do crazy stuff with that. And
True.
Wormkin just got a sort of a taste of that
Yeah.
as well.
All right, so to at least like throw a little compliment and then a little shade, I'm gonna reiterate what Gabriel said, which is I think the speed at which the devs have responded to any issues and making adjustments and patches and updates has been incredible. It's better than any game like this I've ever seen. Now the backhand of that is I think there are some long-term like core design issues that they've kind of tunnel visioned on. So one of them actually leans back into the discussion we had earlier about mechanics. And a lot of these mechanics are things that are already kind of built into the game. So leaning more into tribal synergies, like unit types mattering. Or even some of the mechanics that are actually already built into specific clans, like hunger and stuff like that. I think that the devs have really focused on this idea of when we introduce a new slew of mechanics, they need to be within a new clan. And I don't think that's actually the case. I think it's really, really nice to introduce new mechanics, or like if you have entire areas of design space that you haven't touched to at a great degree, just put them in some of your current clans as opposed to developing a new one. This seems to just be looked over every time the dev stream happens. It's a lot of, hey, we've seen this really, really cool area of design that we just didn't even think of, like moving your own units vertically between floors in ways that are not just like ascending them to overstack or shifting around the positions of your units. A lot of these things have popped up in the modding community, and the devs have praised these mods, and they keep talking about bringing in new clans that use these mechanics. But I think if you have an area of design space, it doesn't have to just be put into a new clan. You don't have to release a whole new clan to put it in the game. Just throw it in one of the current clans in like a 20 card package,
Yeah,
well, I mean,
really
they kind of did that with the Exiles.
Yeah, to a certain extent, that's true.
I'd really like to see them build upon some of the mechanics that are very underused. Um, I'm especially thinking about rally. There's one champion who can rally, and there's nothing else on the player side.
Yep.
And I think Narninian did have a great point there, actually, that a lot of what we've been discussing, even what we discussed earlier, are things that happen with the Friends or Foes release. I think that release is actually extremely underrated in how it kind of changed the depth of each of the clans. I'm not sure why we can't do more things like that. Obviously, like a new set of champions might be spreading us too thin because we don't currently have enough mechanics built into cards in the clan themselves to support a new champion. That's why you discuss rally here, and we have this one rally card that cares about you doing these rally things, and then that's it within the clan because we didn't already have that mechanic built into our commons, uncommons, and rares in the clan. I think a good place to go is you can fill out some new mechanics just with cards, not with new champions. And then some of these champions that have these mechanics that are very, very underrepresented in the cards within those clans, just build out the card set for them, for the mechanics that they already have on them.
So, I mean, some thoughts that I had, and I got involved with the unofficial patch, the one that's maintained by Rising Dusk, right?
Rising Dusk, yeah, I'm using that.
And we had the discussion about that for me, like, I would love to see some of, again, I know I've hit it a couple times, but clan tag stuff, like Hornbreaker Prince could be redesigned to do demon stuff like Shardtail Queen does imp stuff, and that would be sick. Like, demons don't matter. The demon tag matters exactly for Gurg's Goad, and I think that's not exciting. And similarly, hollows could be sick. You could have hollow tags about how they rejuvenate, about how they affect them. Channelers are pretty much trash. What could you do with channelers to make them a lot more interesting than they are? Enemy channelers are way more interesting than the channelers that we get. And I think there's a lot of area there, as you said, viable, where let's introduce into the clans mechanics that kind of flesh out and add more dynamic play without necessarily disrupting with a brand new clan. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
I could actually give a very, very specific example, one that I've thought about a lot, and it actually goes back to what Kaerius was talking about with Shardtail Queen and Rally. So an entire area of design space that has not been touched is bouncing. Bouncing generally in card games is returning units from play to your hand. That's an area of design space we haven't dipped our toe in Monster Train. It's an area of design space that overlaps very, very with Rally and very well with Summon, which are the two things that Shardtail Queen leans into and which Hellhorn generally cares about. That's an example of a mechanic which I think you could put into just a common, uncommon, and rare card package, toss in the game into Hellhorn. It fleshes out Shardtail Queen more, it gives you more variety, it gives you more archetypes to play within that clan. I think that would be a very, very, just good way to go. And then there's obviously similar things that you could do with the other clans.
You can pseudo bounce with endless units and
Killing.
Important work.
Yeah. Ways to do it without units dying is a thing that we just weirdly haven't touched. Oh, Gabriel, I think you're muted. Oh, he might be muted deliberately.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just talking to my stream.
You're good. But yeah, I think it's weird that bounce hasn't been in the game, and it also just slots perfectly into that slot that we're looking to fill.
So then, to my other point, I think that I made a long time ago. I think the other power creep area that I think is unexplored is variety of enemy. Like, I think there's a lot of stuff too that could be there that is not there. Like, the enemies, 90% of them are still pretty vanilla. They're just stats. And I think you could have a lot more complexity throughout stuff like you see in Seraphites, stuff like you see in The Last Divinity, but showing up throughout the floors to make your... And I'd be totally fine if they said, okay, we do full transparency. These are the bosses you're going to get through the whole run. You can hover over them and see everyone you're going to get. But that they are more complex and don't just get steamrolled. They're not just a bunch of stats dumped into some units. So that for me would be a lot more interesting, is to have. I think the only like bosses that have a theme are putting trash in your deck, where you get the boss and the units that are all just together as much trash as possible in your deck. But why not other areas? Why not other things? I guess stealth. I guess you do have the stealth boss as well, where you have stealth units.
Well, there's
and
also
stealth boss.
like Spike's boss doesn't currently make spiky units, something like that. I think Spike's boss and the self-mutilation boss, stealth boss are like really, really interesting. They're a little heartbreaking when you encounter them and you're not prepared. But yeah, I actually fully agree. I would like to see some more fleshed out and intricate minor bosses that lean into hard countering strategies and being very susceptible to certain strategies, but then also compensate for that by giving us the information on them. It creates this really interesting pattern if it's every single fight you know what to plan for. If you're kind of maneuvering your deck in and out of certain archetypes or certain setups as you go through the run, like maybe I need to plan for a stealth boss right now, but the thing that lets me beat stealth boss is not going to be the kind of set of tools that's going to let me beat the certain Seraph I'm fighting. So I actually need to pivot my run mid-run, and I can try to plan for that pivot early on. That would be very interesting.
And then I think going to then the last Divinity fight, if the boss mechanics of the run were more incorporated into the Divinity fight than they are right now, I think then you have a culmination of, this is what I just did 8 times, but now I have to do it in a single boss fight in a much more stress-inducing environment. And I like that idea that the Last Divinity becomes a culmination of what you've done and not its own piece that you have to plan independently. And that, for me, is what's missing. Last Divinity is a really cool encounter that is completely disconnected from whatever you did so far. It's just, okay, if I'm going to place Divinity, I have to build my deck around it, and ideally that deck can deal with everything else along the way. But it's not, like, as I said, it's theming-wise, it's not that the Last Divinity cares what else you did throughout the entire rest of the run. I guess Seraph does that to a degree as well, but I don't know. I like this idea of themed builds, which we have, but there's no themed encounters on the other side, and I think that could be really cool.
Yeah, I definitely like that idea. I mean, if it's based on, I think you're kind of alluding to the 3 main bosses that you face, Telos/Daedalus in the specific version, and then, so on and so forth. It makes for a lot of variety.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, like, we talk about modality, that could be it. That it inherits, so you have to play the waves that are not flying bosses, so 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7. You will see stuff from those waves as units that show up in the Last Divinity fight. Yeah. And you will have modality in terms of something from your 3, 6, and 8. And that could be really cool. The Last Divinity represents your run in final boss form.
Right.
Could be really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
On that theme idea, there is already a bit of a theme with the different variants of Seraph. Especially, it's about the virtues, and they all have some virtue they're named after, but it's corrupted, sort of like patient is the most impatient of them all.
So
diligent makes you work.
I have a very interesting idea. Actually, what if instead of a preview going into the whole thing, enemies that were themed around, like, obviously we all seem to agree that themed enemies around the mini boss that you're fighting seem very, very good and interesting. What if some of the smaller enemies that are themed around the boss that you're fighting kind of leak into the rings before them? You face a single one of those 15-2 stealth 1 units in like ring 2, and then you kind of know that you're going to fight stealth boss in ring 4 or 5, something like that. I think could be an interesting way to do that if you don't just want to give players all the information to plan out their run right off the bat.
You can hint at it with units.
Yeah. Like, if you see a random... Go ahead.
Yeah, but the whole corrupted virtues thing, we could do more of that. Like, there's the 7 classical virtues. So, for example, you could have Seraph the Merciful, who has a bunch of units that have revenge triggers or do damage on exhaust. and stuff like that. Like, he's really not that merciful. You can do a lot with themes like that.
Yeah,
And
and
really
actually,
tie them into the lore.
yeah. On that note, if the Seraph itself had some revenge, that would be a counter to sweep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's for me. That's for me. I think a combination of utilizing what's already in the clans and expanding on it, and then diversifying enemies and kind of, especially with the Last Divinity, somehow tying that combat encounter to the rest of your run would be, for me, like two really huge things that would dramatically improve the feel of runs. That it felt more like an event that I'd been kind of prepping for through my run, rather than an event I was prepping for that's completely disconnected like it is today.
Now, I think if we're talking about a lot of us wanting some kind of increase in difficulty, I don't think we would want it applied to things like this. Like, I think this is just a thing where you want kind of some horizontal shifts in power, because I don't think we want things that actually apply to the player base in a broader sense. I have a lot of people coming to my stream. My stream is centered more on being educational, and so I get a lot of people who are in that climb. You know, they're stuck at Covenant 12 and they're really trying to figure out how to go over that hump. Or they've really slowed down around Covenant 15. I get a lot of that, and I think that's a very really, really cool segment of the player base of Monster Train. You know, the people that you see who are popping into the Discord and they're like, I just got my first Covenant 25 kill. That's awesome, and everyone celebrates that. It's a great time, and I think there's a lot of people who want to engage in the game in a way where they climb up the ladder and then they kind of chill there. But there are players like us who, you know, like, I'm north of a 95% win rate since Divinity came out, and a lot of that's playing with a brand new clan. Like, that's for a game that's meant to be in this kind of realm of roguelike Dark Souls-esque card games. I feel like north of 95% win rate is just a little too high at the top end. I would like to see something added in that has a barrier to entry and isn't just built into the broader game. So that, because I think the difficulty level of the broader game is actually in a very, very good place right now. I think that's a thing that a lot of people who want increased difficulty are missing. I think that the balance of, you know, climbing up to Covenant 25 and learning the game, I think the difficulty of the game is very, very well balanced there right now. So we just need something beyond that. Divinity could have been the thing beyond that, but the tools we were given were really, really good. And also Divinity was kind of built into the broader game anyways. So what if you add some tools that have, or some, you know, levels or bosses that have a barrier to entry to reach them, and you make those extremely difficult? I think that could be a good way to go.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. And I definitely echo the 95% win rate's a bit high for the highest difficulty. I think a lot of thing. I think, you know, that there's a lot of ways they can go about it. I can talk, but, you know, as long as they do something about it, I think that'll be good. And even like additional Covenant levels, I could see that. But yeah, I think it would draw, I think, more attention to the game if there just was kind of a harder, like there is mutators, but I feel like that just isn't the same. Like, they're meant to kind of screw you over, but I feel like just the actual game itself needs to be a little bit more difficulty at higher levels.
This was what I heard was the primary complaint from a lot of the variety streamers that left Monster Train after like a couple months. They played Monster Train pretty heavy. They were doing it a lot, and they just got bored because it was too easy at Covenant 25. And why they went back, a lot of them, to Slay the Spire or whatever else, because exactly that reason, that the difficulty just wasn't satisfying them. And then there were those of us who, instead of going back to one of those games, we just started self-inflicting masochist challenges. So I think
Guilty.
yeah. So I don't know what the solution is. I agree that I think the climb is pretty reasonable for most players, and I think it's a good. In fact, I think the climb is easier now because I think the Covenant 10 modifier change is way easier. It's way easier to deal with Ember Drain than it is with Daze, and the guaranteed loss of capacity on the middle floor is also easier than it was when it was random. Yeah, I don't know what it needs to be. I almost just wonder if rather than focusing on necessarily making the game harder, having more risk reward. Maybe that's just it. Maybe shards need to just do more, because that already you have a built-in risk reward mechanic, but maybe that's it. The shard trade-offs just need to be a lot heavier throughout. I don't know what needs to be done, but it's this weird state where, as I said, like all of us are exclusively doing Divinity runs because we don't find vanilla challenging enough. But even full Divinity runs are not necessarily getting
a lot of these actually
hype spike,
A lot of these really concern me from a viewer and new player perspective. This was a concern I had just with the release of Last Divinity DLC being something that fundamentally changes gameplay. It can be very tough for someone who, has just bought Monster Train or is considering just buying Monster Train to watch our content and really feel like they're playing the same game as us with how fundamentally Last Divinity has changed the game. And that was already a concern. When we start talking about trying to have a way to increase difficulty for some of us more competitive or spiky streamers, what are good ways that we can actually do that without making it so that we're playing a fundamentally different game from the viewers? Like even increasing stats on units seems like it's just a vanilla power increase, but that can change, certain thresholds that you cross with the playability of cards. We talk a lot about, like power creep in card games being a thing that is largely viewed as abilities becoming stronger. But if you just increase the health of a unit by 1 or 5 or 10, you might be changing every way that you can interact with that unit on a fundamental level. Like if we're trying to introduce ways to increase difficulty, I think this is probably an issue that Shiny Shoe is finding. Like there's a certain threshold beyond which we can't increase the difficulty and have it be at a certain win rate for competitive players, but not have the game be so difficult that the players who are trying to climb up Covenant early on just don't feel like they're playing the same game, don't feel like they're viewing the same game that they're playing. That's a really tough thing to balance.
Yeah, that's definitely there's and I will say I've looked at Steam, like the vanilla game has I think a 96% approval rating. DLC's still high, but it's a bit lower. I think it was at like 85 last I checked. And most of the negative reviews kind of echo that even for what it is now, they're basically like, it's a lot of new stuff, but it seems geared toward like people that are playing at a high difficulty. Like I've seen some of the negative reviews kind of allude to that. So it's definitely a tough one from a publisher's
We're in a very awkward space as content creators where I even thought about going into Last Divinity. Like, I can't accept. I'm going to lose too much relevance if I'm not playing the new content, because you're going to have, a certain branch of players that are spiky and like the game and play it a lot. And that's going to be a disproportionate amount of your viewers on Twitch and people who interact with you on YouTube and on the Discord server. You're going to have a lot more players who are more casual and don't interact with your content, but which want to just play the game, have a fun time, climb Covenant maybe. And so I actually thought about going into that week, like it would be content suicide to just not put Divinity on and try to play the vanilla game. But playing the vanilla game, I think, would give newer players, that small percentage of Twitch viewers, but large percentage of the players, more of an idea of what the game is like and more of a shared experience when watching a content creator. That's a tricky spot to be in, and I still haven't figured out a good solution.
I mean, one thing that I'm constantly thinking about is how does this affect our participation if we do Divinity tournaments? Like you mandatory, you have to have the DLC to play. And I think probably the first tournament's going to be like that, but do we perpetuate that you have to have the DLC to participate in tournaments? I don't know. And I don't know that it's kind of tough for me as well to think about what is the right way to develop this game beyond where it's at right now without exclusively catering to the top end. And I don't know. That's why for me, like my suggestions, at least I think more flavor is broad appeal. Having more flavored runs is broadly interesting compared to just ramping difficulty up. So this idea of like Divinity being a culmination of your run, I think is broadly interesting. Even if it's not any harder, even if it's equally difficult now, I still would think it would be more interesting. And similarly, using tags, like taking advantage of mechanics that are already available in new and interesting ways, I think is broadly interesting rather than just introducing a new clan and new content and a new clan and new, more complexity. Taking what's already there and thinking about new ways to utilize it to make it more dynamic, again, I feel like is more broadly appealing to someone. It's a very similar thing. I mentioned already. So I used to play. I didn't stream it because I didn't stream at the time, but I used to play fairly competitive Civ 5, and every time they would do a new expansion, you alienated an entire group of players that just were like they weren't gonna do it. And so then every single time a new expansion came out in competitive, which was not like there was a lot of competitive, like it wasn't very serious, but all of a sudden you would just lose participation for like a couple months, and then slowly people would get it and come in and stuff like that. But it hurt every single time they came out with a new expansion. It hurt competitive play for like a little while, and then it would finally kind of even out again. And that's also my concern is like, does the DLC bring back new people or people that were turned off by the base game? No, like they're not gonna. It didn't change anything fundamentally enough that they're gonna come back. And for a lot of players, it is overwhelming. I just played with my wife for the first time yesterday on stream. There's no chance I'm showing her the last Divinity content until she's played at least like 30, 40 games, because she needs to understand fundamentals before she can jump into stuff like that. And so it's just like, I do agree with that. I think we can handle the complexity. I don't think it's great for the main player base. I think something that would have been more simple and broadly appealing might have been also nice.
So I have an idea for a possible solution to both the thing you alluded to and the thing I'm alluding to. Obviously, they're slightly related, but maybe simultaneously, and I'd like to get you guys' feedback on it. So Slay the Spire has something which is this to a very, very small degree, but which is basically your ability to do something which is optional, which not just makes the game more difficult as you're going through the runs, but gives you more difficult things to achieve in a later part of the run. So essentially, as you're playing through a run, everyone's run looks exactly the same if you're playing on the same ascension level up to a certain point. But if you've chosen to keep going further and kind of press your luck with your ability to win, then you can take a further challenge, which is, the heart, as opposed to just stopping on a final boss. And this was a thing that some people have discussed with Divinity. I don't think it's a great way to handle that, having necessarily just like you can either just stop at Seraph or you can go to Divinity. But what if you had multiple layers like this, which were really, really difficult points that you could achieve if you decided to push it further, or if you did things that allowed you to push further into the game. And those parts were really, really difficult, but you don't change anything fundamental about what happens between the point at which you start the game and the point at which you reach that first possible stop point. That would count as a victory for a normal player who's trying to climb Covenant. That gives us as content creators a period of the game that we can play that always feels relatable to people who are just trying to climb Covenant, or maybe just reach Covenant 25, or even just started the game. They get to play what we're playing, and maybe they'll have difficult pushing into these tougher areas, but they'll at least feel like some portion of the content that they're watching is the thing that they're playing. Whereas currently what we have is, if you try to increase the difficulty in the level in a way that just broadly affects the game, either you're going to have a game that's too easy for the top end, but very viewable for most of your players, or you're going to have a game that is so distant from how you played on the top end relative to how the average player plays the game that it just doesn't resemble it, and you're not getting value from that content. I think having ways to dive further into runs and engage with tough areas that are optional and things you can decide during a run, or things you can achieve during a run, would be maybe a way to fix that problem.
It's interesting because like as you're describing it, it's the opposite of what. So Monster Train and Shade the Slay Spire have two complete opposite things. Like there's no real benefit from going to the heart. Like there's no you don't get a stronger deck because you win for the heart. You get a stronger deck because you go for Divinity. And I think there's positives, negatives about it. The positive is you can push your deck further. The negative is you can push your deck further. And so the challenge also becomes the enabler for insane success. And maybe that's one thing that could be toned down, or at least maybe disconnect that it's not just shards that equal a final thing, but something else. Like one of the thoughts that I even had as you were talking about this was there's the cabinet events where you take the 3 crap artifacts, then out of that you get something back good. What if you didn't get something back good? What if you just took the artifacts and it resulted in a change in how the game played out the rest of the time? Purely negatively, but as a way to challenge yourself. Like things like that could be really cool. Options to flavor, or even trials that you could take, level 1 trial, level 2 trial. Level 2 trial is a permanent effect. Level 1 trial is a temporary effect. And level 2 trials enable something later down the line that you can't get without taking them. Actually, that would be pretty sick. I was thinking about that. You take a trial. Like, what my thought is that you currently don't have trials on 3, 6, and 8. What if you could? What if there were permanent rest of run trials that you could take on 3, 6, and 8? And they unlock something like The Last Divinity. It's objectively harder. There is no benefit to taking them except that you can push your deck further.
Yeah, this is actually what STS does, which is you need to collect all of the keys, and those keys have a very tangible cost. Like you're going to have to skip 1 rest site. You have to skip 1 boss relic, or elite relic, I mean. And you have to skip, or you have to take 1 optional tougher fight that you wouldn't have had to otherwise take. These costs are relatively small, but I think they affect your gameplay in a way that doesn't feel like it's fundamental. It doesn't feel like it's aesthetic. It's basically just, what if a really high level player playing through those first 9 rings just ends up with, 1 less relic than, the average player who's just playing to beat Seraph. And then maybe like a couple of other things, something really, really minor that doesn't feel like it fundamentally changes what you're doing when you're going through the run. I think if you took on stuff like those optional relics, you could be changing the game in too much of a fundamental way. Like, obviously, I'm not assuming that you're going with those specific examples, but like, you wouldn't want it to be like you have to take the broken wheel or something else like that, because that fundamentally changes how the run plays out. But
I was
skipping
thinking,
over 1 artifact or something like that.
So what if, for example, you had on the dataless fight, if you had to do like a certain sacrifice, and what that meant is that you would get randomly bombs showing up on your floors throughout the rest of your runs. It's minor. It's a bomb. It doesn't do a whole lot, but it could affect some of the later runs where all of a sudden you're having to deal with a bomb on a floor that you didn't have to deal with before. Minor effect, but then leading into something bigger. And similar with Talos, you could have, I don't know what it could be, but something thematic to the boss. Yeah. Or I don't think what the Talos effects are all hit effects. I can't think of what that would be. But Arcus, you could have a shard show up occasionally.
Well, the Talos does have the armor, sap, and rage. You could maybe just have that, like to the units or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. So something minor, like not like game destroying, like those artifacts do. All of those artifacts are like, they completely change your run. But something like that, a minor effect that you're saying, okay, yeah, I feel like my deck can deal with bombs for the rest of the run, and you have to take 2 of 3 or something. I don't know. Similar to like with the heart, you don't have to take it every time. You don't have to fight every elite boss. You have to pick 1 out of the 3 floors, and then you don't have to skip every single rest. You just pick 1 at a certain time. Oh yeah, Talos rearranging. That could be it. You would have a unit rearrange at some point. A certain floor now rearranges units. I don't know, but I think something that doesn't fundamentally change, but would just negatively affect the rest of your run, and you have to take a certain amount of them throughout to unlock, would be cool. Pure net negatives, no trade-off.
I think there's something very, very stark in having those clear thresholds that you have to do these things to cross later in the game to fight some optional boss or reach some optional area. I think having that very, very clear threshold is very nice here. Again, it makes it so you are playing the same game as someone who can't reach that area up to that point. And then for a very, very small portion of your run, you're playing this point that they aspire to get to. I think crossing a couple of thresholds there that kind of shift you from having, your average player maybe have like a 20 to 40% win rate against Seraph up to that point. And your really, really good players having 90+% win rates. And then having some area that you can reach after that is much tougher to reach. You have to take cost to get to it. And which has, maybe a 20 to 40% win rate for really, really good players. given our skill level right now. I think that would be a really, really good way to go. Again, the focus for making content should just be, does it feel like two of you are playing the same game as them? Because otherwise they're not getting great value out of it. I try to mitigate that by making my content very, very educational and also not taking any of my knowledge about the game for granted. Like I'll explain things that a lot of streamers won't explain because I don't assume that every single person who watches me knows them, and I don't feel like I'm losing much in re-explaining them for a lot of the more advanced players. That's what I have to do right now, but I think there's things that can be built into the game design-wise that would enable us to make content a little more naturally and have it be more broadly appealing.
What do you guys think about, and I'm throwing a big wrench into things now, but with the popularity of all these battle royale type games that are quote unquote like unfair, what do you think if they added more of like a new, maybe not Hell Rush, but basically a battle royale multiplayer mode where you can, at free for all, you can screw over anybody unfairly, but you have to pay to do it, you know? I feel like that could actually drive a lot of people to A, stream the game more, but B, watch it more too, and play it more.
So,
I don't know.
Interestingly enough, you mentioned kind of some offensive options there that don't currently exist. I think that an interesting discovery that we found when running the tournaments, at least something interesting for me that might actually be benefited from having offensive options amongst players, is there are a lot of interesting runs. I think the most interesting runs you can find are actually the ones where your competitive players just barely can't make it. Like they get to ring 8 or ring 9 and they die. I think it's much less interesting when they die early, and it's much less interesting when they just, are dumpstering the run, and it's just who dumpsters it more. So if you give people options to like actually mess with each other at a cost, and you make the game a lot more about survival, I think you could have something similar to Hell Rush, which feels more like a battle royale than Hell Rush currently does, because that's what they originally marketed Hell Rush as, was, it's kind of like our version of a battle royale, but we've gotten to a point as players in the design of the game where you have your good players who are just going to absolutely destroy any Covenant 25 run on Hell Rush, and you have your players who are going to struggle against it. I would like to see it balanced in such a way where you could interact with other players and try to bring them down to a point where they just barely can't win runs in general.
The other thought, if they didn't want to do this kind of crossover of people playing, if Hell Rush was infinite, if it was just randomized boss unit combos, and it was just infinite. Every time you got a brand new floor where you're picking units, you get shops, whatever, and it was just going and going and going. Also, the other part of this is that what kind of pisses me off about Hell Rush is that you can't finish runs if everybody else dies. So for me, if that was the point, if the point was not score, if the point was survival, eliminating even the offensive options and just being like, this is endless. Hell Rush is endless monster train, and it continues to scale, and whoever can build the deck that can go longest could also be very interesting. Certainly,
I think we've gotten to a point where we've ironed out a really, really amazing tournament format for the tools that we have available to us. And I think Hell Rush also has potential. I mean, we did some really, really interesting things with those goofy hellish Hell Rushes the other day. I think a new format in the vein of what you're talking about, which is just score is not the relevant factor here. It'll be used as a tiebreaker if necessary, but it doesn't matter. Like, we also discovered during that if you have more points, you still lose if someone got to a later ring. Yeah. I think that should be the most important thing if you're talking about building a competitive tournament-style format for this game. Having it be survival-based should be the most important thing. And I feel like that's the most fun way to play the game for a lot of people, is just, if you think about 90% of your player base being players who are really just focused on survival and actually just getting to Seraph in the first place, not worrying about score, the way to appeal to those players is have your competitive format also feel more like the thing they play. And in this case, it doesn't have to be the exact format they play, but have it be something that is more about survival and less about score and just crashing the game as hard as you can.
No, and I
think a new format would do that.
And look at every competitive game there is. It's just that game on steroids. It's not a completely different game, and our tournaments are. They are. And I don't know how, as you said, we don't really have the tools to it otherwise. I mean, Narninian, we did some like insane stuff in the past. We did, what was it? We did a challenge where it's whoever can have the most units with permadeath enabled.
Oh, right. The league stuff, yeah.
The league stuff.
Yeah.
But again,
that
you're
was
playing a
the
completely
fun.
different game. It's fun, but you're playing a different game than the other player base because nobody's going for score. Nobody's going for these weird masochist self-inhibiting stuff. And I don't know how we do that. And also no one's speedrunning. We could do speedrunning, but like Narninian and I are the only ones that want to do it. So it doesn't help
Sure,
it
you'll
either.
be good at it.
But so this is where I think I'm 100% in agreement. I think we're in a weird spot. We're at the top end to make the game to separate the top players. You have to do something extra, and currently that extra is score. And it would be nice if there was something more relatable to players. When you watch competitive League of Legends, it's just League of Legends on steroids, but it's the same goal. Kill the Nexus. When you watch Hearthstone at the highest level, it's the same cards, the same setup. It's just better players who have better, understanding of the game, playing it out to see who wins. It's the same experience on steroids, and that's not currently Monster Train. It's that same experience, but because everybody's likely to survive, we have to add a score. So then it's also about flying kills.
Even outside of survival, once you make score even the tiniest amount of a factor, now everything about how you play your run has changed from the way in which every single other person plays their run. Like I don't play for score ever when I'm doing making any of my content. And when I was looking at the tournament, I was like, I understand Monster Train on a very, very good level. I'm very good at it. But this is just a completely foreign game to me, trying to play for score, caring about playing on lower floors just to do that. The moment score matters, it doesn't become a matter of like, players who are worse at the game generally playing at a lower score and they want to aspire to get a higher score. It becomes you're either playing for score or you're not playing for score. And most of your player base are not going to play for score. So also that's just kind of an underwhelming way to have a game like this, a game that's built on being difficult and tough to learn and tough to really, really master, be something that comes down to just a points race. I think a lot of people are having a lot of fun playing this game as a survival game, and we're kind of stuck here playing it as an arcade game, who's getting the highest score on the scoreboard.
And the only other way to remedy that is mutator-based stuff. And then if you're playing mutator-based stuff, again, it's not the same game. It's the same game, but you have to play completely differently.
It may not be too far-fetched to think that enough people getting together, especially enough content creators, relevant content creators getting together, could make the kind of impact that we need to introduce a new format. I mean, we have some kind of a design for it. Maybe we could even talk about this and work on it even more. But I think if we can introduce a format that scales in a competitive way, still feels like the base game, that would be good for new players. It would be good for people watching content who are on any scale level, and it would be good for the competitive scene. It seems like a win all around.
The only question, and this is actually the fundamental question, which is the thing I always ask with Monster Train, is this going to be a Slay the Spire where it's just there's no competitive Slay the Spire scene. There's never been one. There was speedrunning for a while, but then that kind of died off. But the scene in Slay the Spire is a bunch of players that are really good trying to win streak. That's it. And is that what Monster Train becomes, or is it possible to pivot? And do the developers want to, or would they rather focus on a new game? This is what I also don't know. And what we'd have to find out is what is their long-term goal? Is it to be like Slay the Spire and just kind of have like a staple of content creators that are mostly just doing win streaking, or is the intention to do something different? And I don't know. The developers haven't really said what they're beyond just adding more content, what their plan is to do with the game. And this would be interesting to discuss with them as well.
I would say there's at least a hint as to the answer in it. If you look back in the early launch days of Monster Train, a lot of the conversations with Mark and a lot of the developer streams, there was a really, really big emphasis on the key difference between this and Slay the Spire and other similar games being the fact that this game has multiplayer. Like obviously people talk about the clan combos and stuff like that, and that's where the game has leaned a lot more towards like, oh man, we have a lot of new clans, we have a lot of new cards, we have a lot of new events. But in the early days, I think there was a big emphasis on the fact that this game has multiplayer, and that separated it so much from the pack. Does the game just want to, be successful and kind of, push up into an area that we know is established in the market, or does it want to carve out something really, really specific? Do the developers want to carve out something really specific? I think if they do want to carve out something specific, you can't do it just by being Slay the Spire with some deeper mechanics in terms of how you pick your clan and how you encounter events and how you go through the run. I think you need to carve out something a little more unique, and that really could be leaning harder into multiplayer and competitive play.
And what I love about this is it's competitive play in a completely different direction. It is not, I'm not playing against you. It's still PvE. It's still primarily PvE. Yeah. It's more along the lines of like, Tetris 100 or something like that, where it's like, it's really focused on, I'm playing my own game. I'm just trying to play my own game better than everybody else. And I think that space doesn't have a lot of strong players apart from like, a handful of these, like kind of taking an old game and then converting it into a battle royale kind of.
And I actually think Tetris 100 or whatever it is
Tetris 99,
a template to Fallout 99, right? Like, because you can still screw over players in that, and I think that's part of the fun of it. And I think it'd be a good format to kind of base a new Hell Rush on that could really, I don't know, maybe they sell. I feel like they could sell millions of copies if they had a big multiplayer thing.
Survival based multiplayer, not score based.
I think that in the vein of what we had discussed earlier, which was these offensive mechanics, that's something that's like possibly something you could include, but feels like an optional design choice into how you want this format to play out. But the key focus should just be a multiplayer format where survival is the key.
Yes,
I think that's kind of the fundamental thing of it. And then whether or not offensive and defensive elements feel like they're an appropriate measure to take there is a separate discussion to have. But I feel like at the very least, your base of what you should start with to really, really carve out a space here is make this a multiplayer survival game.
Yep. I 100% agree, and I think this is where, as Gabriot already said, this would take the game from kind of, in a lot of ways, higher production value Slay the Spire, with really interesting mechanics, a really, I think, quite good learning curve, and a decent end, and put it into an environment where you can get mass appeal, which currently it doesn't have mass appeal. It has niche appeal. And, I don't know. There are Slay the Spire clones every day. I think this is it's not a clone of Slay the Spire, but if you were to call it a clone of the Slay the Spire, it's probably the best one on the market. Certainly have not found one as enjoyable as this, but there are tons of Slay the Spire clones. But if this could go in that direction, I think this would be the way to have it be a long-term game that I could imagine, beyond just when DLCs come out, coming back and diving into.
I also feel like there's a very low opportunity cost to this. You still don't need to change anything about the way the game is currently played. Obviously, if this scene takes off, then the competitive scene, the content creation scene line up, and then that'll probably be what a lot of your casual players roll into. But you're not making a big sacrifice by creating this new format. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and everyone just goes back to playing the game the way we are right now. I would also like to emphasize that on the basis, outside of just the design aspect of this, on the basis of logistics, of trying to create some kind of competitive scene, you have a lot of people, every single person here, especially included, who will put the effort into making this competitive scene work on a logistical level without an incredible investment from Shiny Shoe. Or Good Shepherd, whichever one would be involved more directly with that. I think we have a lot of people here who would be willing to work on trying to develop this competitive scene and seeing if it works with some new format, and trying to create content around that format and seeing if it works, and if it doesn't, just moving on. I feel like the opportunity cost here is extremely low, and this is at the very least a plausible route to carving out an area of the market that does not exist at all.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Maybe some discussions to have there. It's a tough channel to get into. Obviously, we have some of the bigger content creators here, but a lot of the people who have the reach to discuss these things a little more directly are more like your variety streamers than your dedicated Monster Train streamers. So how we open up those channels is a tricky one to figure out. We've started to open up pretty recently to at least a small degree, with some direct conversations happening about certain things. It would be nice to reach a point where we could have some more direct channels, at least just something suggestion based for some of the dedicated Monster Train content creators to discuss these types of things, or at least just offer up ideas. Yeah.
This is a 2-hour conversation that I had planned for 1 hour. Which is absolutely fine. I'll probably split it into 2 main topics then, because we talked about power creep, but we also talked about like how to address kind of the elephant in the room, which is what makes Monster Train long-term viable. It's something that Narninian we talked about a long time ago, back when we were talking about speedrunning, was how do you make a game like this, if not evergreen, at least something that can last for a few years. It's not even 1 year old yet. We're encroaching onto 1 year right now, so it's still a relatively new game, and begs the question, if we're at the top end talking about already feeling like the game's a little bit too easy, what needs to be done to keep that group playing for another year? Tournaments helped, honestly. I think tournaments invigorated the community a bit, because there were days when you had literally no one streaming Monster Train. And now, at least, at almost all times, you have at least a handful of them. And that was before the DLC came out. Like, before the DLC came out, I saw that pivot where now we all of a sudden had streamers making content again, where there was a time when like there really wasn't a lot. So I think that helps. But I don't know. And I don't know how often we can sustain a tournament environment that's entirely based on score. But
yeah, we've really encountered a separate issue here, which could not have been predicted going into it, which is the game that we play in this tournament scene, for as great as it is, just isn't the game that the vast majority of the player base play. It's just a completely different game. And I think there are ways to address that, and the main way to do that would be a new format.
Could be the case. All right, so we'll end the discussion. Appreciate all of the thoughts. We had a group that changed dynamically throughout, so I don't know. Who may I heard from? Kaerius, Narninian, you guys have been quiet. Any thoughts on the last topic before we close?
I think they could do more with Hell Rush. We did our custom Hell Rushes. There's no lobby system or anything.
And there's no matchmaking, and there's no ranking. It's just literally random. You play who's there, and which makes sense.
Seed.
Yeah.
It's like you have to type in the seed to get in. There's no matchmaking. There's no lobby. If you really developed the custom Hell Rush scene, or just Hell Rushes at different difficulty levels, that would also do a lot, I think.
Yeah, I'd be down with some custom, like kind of like old school StarCraft BattleNet. Just make a lobby. You can have whatever settings you want, name it something, wait for people to join, and hit go. I think that'd be pretty fun.
It's a little like a split between making it public or private as you wish, and then having it just displayed on a screen. Yeah, I like that.
That's how we did Civilization forever, so I'd also be down with that.
I want to see you stream Civilization sometime, Nate.
No, I would.
I'm interested.
It's been years. I never could get into competitive Civ 6, so it kind of died for me there. But
yeah, it seemed like Civ 6 wasn't quite on par with 5 or 4. But
I think it's more fun. I think it's less competitive. I think the competitive side of it is less fun. But the actual, just playing it, I think, is actually a better game. But
all right, anyway. Narninian, you can have the floor for a bit.
I don't have much to say. I just think we are lacking player base to do a lot of our grand ideas. But
it's a chicken egg thing. Cool. It's a chicken egg thing. I think if they had a bigger player base, endless mode would already be there. I think the fact that the player base is what it is, which is about, they confirmed, right, 500,000 players. It's hard to, I would say, develop an entire new mode for that level of player base. It's a struggle.
Yeah, you need the perils of production before the furnace tap.
Yeah, exactly.
I love
'Cause
that.
you're never gonna pick up. You're never gonna pick up. No, I take the furnace tap every time. You know what?
Actually, the two cost reduction on furnace tap with repeater, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's fun.
So then the next question is, I had some thoughts around games similar to last time. We have 5 people. It's an awkward number of people to do eyes, hand, and brain with. But we could do...
I will not be able to stick around, so
Okay.
you will have 4.
You have 4 people. Kaerius, are you sticking around or not?
I'm about to head to bed, so
Okay. Then, Gabriot, Narninian, are you guys down for another...
Oh yeah.
I'm
Sure.
down.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I want to do it with a twist. First off, I will say thank you again, Viable, for joining. Also, Kaerius for the discussion, and appreciate all of the thoughts. I'll try to put together something because 2 hours might be a long time for people to watch. I might try to edit down and try to get. I don't know. Depends on how motivated I am tomorrow to do anything. But
You could do the full video and then like a highlight reel.
yeah, I might end up doing
before
that.
we wrap up,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you put any thought in when the next tournament's gonna be?
Yeah, actually, we already have a date tentatively, which is the 24th of April. I realize now that's 2 weeks away. Or not 2 weeks, 3 weeks away. Came a lot faster than I thought. I think we should finalize planning. I cannot get a commitment yet. Of course, you can join. Yeah, sorry, Gabriot asking. Yes, you can join. It's probably going to be the 24th of April with the qualifier seeds going out a week before. We're still finalizing the format. I think we have a better format. I don't know everybody's thoughts on it, but I think it's more interesting and a lot less painful for players who just like play one round and then they're done. But more information will come on that. I don't believe we'll change hosting. I think it's going to be hosted the same as last time. Maybe the next tournament we could talk with Shiny Shoe about doing some more hosting, but at least for now, I expect we host it on my Discord and we trade streaming hosting between the group of us that are commentating. So we'll sort that out and then announce it soon.
When you say less painful for those who play one round and then are out, it's
Yeah.
going to be more of a Swiss
yes.
system or something.
Yeah, exactly.
If I can get one note in, I'm going to avoid making this self-promotion, but I just do want to note for anyone who might be a regular in my streams, I have not missed a single stream since I started, but I will be missing my first one tomorrow, and I did not expect to. So just to give people a heads up that I won't be there for a scheduled stream tomorrow, wanted to let people know, because you can really lose a lot of ground very quickly just by missing one scheduled stream that people were expecting, especially when you've been consistent. I will not be available tomorrow. I'm going on a little sudden vacation for my birthday. So,
Happy birthday.
Happy
Thank
birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday.
very much looking forward to commentating on the next tournament. That was a blast. Me and Gabriel got the synergy down. It's only getting better. We're gonna crush it.
You got to play.
I was
you can't just
super-
commentate. This is now a requirement. Everyone that participates
Yeah,
has to.
Sanguine Penguin is gotta be the new host. We gotta reach him.
That's been the trend.
tradition.
The tradition is that the winner hosts. But no, I would like to try to get the format where everyone can participate and commentate and do a mix. And I think our new setup could potentially work for that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the finals might. Not
Finals are
work out,
finals, but
yeah.
All right, Gabriel. Apparently, I'm not welcome anymore. So enjoy your commentary with Sanguine.
No, see, I'll be playing. Hopefully, if I make it, I'll have to qualify on the first day because I'm in a cabin for the rest of that week leading up to the tournament. But hopefully, I can qualify.
and you're
I would still prefer to do commentary if that is okay with people, whoever co-commentator might be. Mostly
You should-
because I, again, do not play the game for points ever. So I am
Well, me neither.
woefully-
Okay, let me tell you this. I don't either. And until the tournament, and that was a lot of fun still. So I would at least give the qualifiers a try and see how you do.
If I could plug Viable for a co-host, though, I got to say, you probably won't find anybody that can get that graph done in real time the way he did.
that was something that kind of felt a little more natural to me, and it's something that I really want to do commentary rather than play and just start from there because it's something I feel like I'm really good at, something I enjoy doing, and also I've kind of thought about trying to build a little portfolio of doing gameplay commentary, maybe apply for some color commentary jobs in, obviously Monster Train doesn't have anything official right now, but in other games, stuff like that, I would prefer to stick to commentary side. It also lets me plan for being on the commentary team if there's not just like a chance I may or may not be on it. Building the charts, building the layouts, and being prepared to interact with them is something that's been helpful.
Gotcha.
Well, you can be the captain of your own ship, but we'll have you participate either way. All right. Yeah, let's pivot. So if you guys, sorry, that was really, I don't know, that felt more awkward than I was intending.
It's been a good talk.
Yes. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you for the discussion. And I think we'll try to do this regularly again. We were doing State of the Game a long time ago. I now renamed it to State of the Train because why not? And I would like to do it at least once a month if we can, maybe in between tournaments, like kind of on the off weeks. I think it's good to kind of get in a feeling for how we're feeling about the game. What do most content creators, or at least some of the content creators, think about the current state? And I think it also, I don't know if the devs ever watched the original State of the Games, but it might be that some of them check it out and maybe they feel inspired. I don't know. We'll see.
I think it is possible, guys, that I might be able to shift my scheduled streams from Sunday to Saturday to make this thing work if we can establish something more consistent. I think it actually would be really productive for us to establish some kind of consistent collaborative content that's not just playing Monster Train.
Yeah.
Gives us a lot more visibility within the community in kind of a broader range of areas. Yeah, if we can build up something consistent to do on Saturdays, then I wouldn't mind shifting my stream schedule around that.
I also I almost to my chat I need to bring up that Bogworm being 3 pip is just wrong.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Fake.
At the very least, just like make Echo Right reduce their size, something like that.
Yeah, I didn't expect that one going full martial lord the other day.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I guess I can't play all the units that I did everything based around now.
All right. Yep. I will sign off so Nate can finally sign off because he's been looking to sign off.
No, I just don't want to. We get a lot of complaints around how long Monster Train videos get. I've been trying to pare that down across the board. That's been, of all the criticism I've gotten on my channel over the past year, 99% of the criticism is your videos are too long. So
I cut all of the dead air out of mine, or at least my ones that were more edited.
I don't have the patience to do that. It's hard.
By the way, closing words for me.
Yeah.
All you who complain about how easy the game is now and you have to find ways to make it harder, take more shards. I do. I challenge myself to take as many shards as I possibly can and try to win anyway.
I like it. I think
it gets a lot harder. I do not have your win streaks.
I find it very difficult to do things that make games more difficult that are like either arbitrary or feel like they're just suboptimal. Like I'm just playing suboptimally to make the game more difficult. That's a tough one for me. It doesn't get the same feel as the game just being more difficult. Though I can see that a lot of people don't.
One of my favorite runs was actually after I watched one of Narninian's videos. He did the War is Hell expert challenge. And one of those mutators is that you get 15 packed shards after each fight. And he was kind of barely taking any shards otherwise. And I looked at that. It looked like an easy run. And I figured, what the hell? I'll do the same clan combo with Primordium and Awoken. And I took every shard I could and ended up with 380 shards and just crushed it.
I do actually want to squeeze in one final 15-second word, and then I will say nothing other than bye for Nate's sake. I would encourage anyone who makes content in this game to never take any of your knowledge about the game for granted. Viewers really, really respond to content being more educational. They really, really eat it up. And I think a lot of people tend to go in autopilot mode or talk about the more advanced things that happen in runs. But if we want to reach a broader player base right now, with Divinity not being the same type of game that they're playing, the only way that we can do that with the tools that we're given is just be more educational. Teach people about things that you're kind of just, autopiloting in your run, but which some players might not be. Just stop and maybe assume that some of the people in your chat are not Covenant 25 grinders like us for a minute. I think we'll all benefit from that.
I find that Narninian and Gabriot are two of the best at being educational in that manner. They often explain their choices. We're going to take this now because that, especially Narninian, I see that a lot.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate
Kaerius, I appreciate being excluded from that list.
I haven't actually watched your content yet, so I can't say.
The second dagger.
So sorry about that, but I watch Gabriot, I watch Nathaniel, I watch Narninian. I used to watch a lot of Voyix, but he's not really in the community as much. Like, he hasn't been in the tournaments or anything, but he's been playing a long time, and he can be on and off about being educational. Sometimes he's very educational, and sometimes he's just slogging through kind of in a daze because he's recording at 4 a.m.
I can relate to that. A lot of mine are at 3/4 a.m. insomnia times.
Yeah,
I mean,
probably benefit from not being a live stream. Like, I just don't upload those videos sometimes.
Yeah, I definitely. This is actually something where, for me, I lost a lot of my competitive edge when I started just live streaming all the time, because I play from 11 o'clock to 2 a.m. And so I think that's why people watch too. I don't know. I maybe they watch just because they know I'm going to crash and burn. But yeah.
I will catch you guys later. It was a great chat. Hope to be invited back.
No, that's why. Let's talk. We have the group. Let's talk and keep thinking. Yeah, we're here for the misclicks. Thanks. Yeah, we can talk again, and I think we would continue to have rolling stuff. I think it'd be good. I'm down for Saturdays. It's the easiest for me, certainly. And if it works for everybody, great. And if not, I'm also flexible. I stream almost every night at the same time anyway.
If I'm allowed, Gabriot, I will see you on the commentary team when you lose in the second round.
I mean,
nobody. First round's my worst.
nobody yet has had the honor of losing in the first round of their own tournament by dying on ring 5. So I will hold that record and be proud of it.
I got lucky.
Looking forward to you actually making it to the final once.
I've made to the final twice. Once in a tournament I didn't host, and there I completely choked. And then once in a tournament I did host, and I also completely choked. So I have a track record of choking on ring 5s. It's like my it's the bane of my runs, ring 5.
Well,
all right,
we were both in that same first round where you made it the farthest to like ring 6 or 7, and I was out in ring 4, but just everybody died.
Everybody died. Yeah.
Yeah,
all right.
That's tournament number 2 there.
Okay, we got to switch. We got to do some real monster training. We have people waiting for see you viable. And Kaerius, if you're signing off, I'll see you later as well.
Is anybody streaming right now? I can raid you because